Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our, Anna, are you? Welcome to our November work session. Since 5 p.m., the board has been in closed session for the employment, discussion of the employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district or legal counsel for the district, and collective negotiating matters between the district and its employees or their representatives. Hey, good evening, everybody.
Sorry.
Now we know what the delay is. So I'll introduce I'll hear a motion to come out of closed session.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to come out of closed session. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we're in open session. Well, welcome, everybody. As always, our mission is to educate students to be self-directed learners, collaborative workers, complex thinkers, quality producers, and community contributors. Before we do the roll call, I'll let everybody know. I want to welcome our new audience for the first time, and you may have heard some of the echoes. We checked it out. It is working. We are streaming live. So for people that want to watch us every 2 weeks, you'll be able to do that from the comfort of your own home from now on. So welcome to the people who are watching us on their computers. So on to the meeting. I will start out with a roll call.
Board members present: Terry Fielden, Susan Price, Jackie Romberg, Mike Yensch, Jim Dennison, Susan Crotty, and Dave Weeks.
Okay, before we move to public comments, Mr. Bridges would like to make some comments about a very sad event we've had this past week, so I'll turn it over to him.
Just a brief update to the Board of Education. As you all are aware, Scott School, Naperville School District 203, and the entire Naperville community suffered a tragic loss last week. The unfortunate loss of one of our students, as well as a student from District 204. Continues to be a very sad and tragic moment for our entire community. We continue to work with the Scott staff, providing support and resources as necessary, social workers and psychologists, and other crisis support personnel as needed. Visitation for Justin was this evening. A number of support staff are there throughout the entire time tonight, as will be for the funeral tomorrow. I would just, a tragic event. I would like to commend the Scott School staff and the Scott community for how they've come together in this difficult time and worked together and supported each other, and know that the entire effort of this school district, out of this building, the entire school district, was focused on supporting Scott School, its staff, its students, and will continue to be for as long as necessary to help them through this tragic event, which includes providing support for the family as necessary. So I'll provide you with additional updates as information becomes available. But I'd like to thank the Board of Education for the support and understanding that you gave the administration in the past week as we helped Scott School deal with this tragedy and continue to move forward. Thank you.
If everyone would indulge me, in light of the events of the past week, I'd like to take just a moment of silence for everyone to reflect on them and to reflect on the survivors who have been affected by this. Thank you very much. Okay, I'd like to open it up for public comments now. We have one request so far, so I'd like to ask Dr. Katui, am I pronouncing that correctly, to come on up? Come on up. Since we're broadcasting live, we have to get you on camera, so if you could have a seat up at this table, and either one
of those chairs.
And take the microphone and just hit the black button, and we'll be good to go. And can you hit the microphone? And if you could, to start, could you introduce yourself and your address for the record?
Yes. My name is Stefan Katsoyo, and I'm a professor of mathematics at DePaul University in Chicago, in Lincoln Park. I live here in Naperville, and I have an 8-year-old son who's going third grade this year. He was supposed to. Took COGAT, which is an aptitude test, based on which the whole education of third grade students in this country is directed. So they are separate. They give various levels of abilities with high accuracy, and based on that, students have. They give guidelines of how each level of aptitude has to be taught, and based on that, and states and school districts throughout the country follow these guidelines and bring students to different tracks, and they teach the students according to the guidelines. In the spring, there are those state standardized tests, based on which every school district gets its rating. So practically, this is what gives the school rating. And when I bought my house, I just looked at the school rating, and I knew which school shall I get close to. Now there is I found that there is a problem with the school district, the way the school district interprets those numbers. So the highest rating corresponds to enrichment program, and the school district separates the top 20% of the students for enrichment for these 6 months. So, and in addition to COGAT, school district has a couple of other tests of its own, which are not publicized ahead of time, no study materials. And they come in serious contradiction with the results of COGAT. COGAT is an IQ test. You can give IQ test at any point of time, and they could guarantee with accuracy the level of ability, while the school district gives a test at the beginning of the year, and it's like giving the final exam at the beginning, and a pop-up quiz that you don't know what material is that, and that's going to decide the aptitude of a student. And when you add up the points, the way the school district adds the points, a 99 percentile on the national rating, COGAT national rating, counts as 5 points out of 19. In the case of my son was rated 99 percentile, compound in the two categories, quantitative and non-verbal, which is analytical. And school district comes up with a different scale of 8 points only for those two categories, of 8 points, and my son scores 5 out of 8. So according to the national rating, he is 99 percentile, A++, exactly enrichment grade. And school district 203 says 5 out of 8, which is 62.5%. This is D grade by all means. In addition, there is another category, teacher's recommendation. School district doesn't wait for the teacher recommendation for all students. My son got 0 from the teacher recommendation in the beginning, while the teacher recommendation was maximum. So on Friday, we found out that the teacher recommendation was maximum point. So I found a serious problem with the school district way of selecting the students for enrichment, and I believe that if you match the right teaching to the right ability level, it might be that this school district 203 is the best school district in the Chicago area, is the top school district in the Chicago area, and I'm not right. I have reason to believe that because, for example, 10 years ago, Lucent was the top technology company in the country, and many people are associated to Lucent. Our school district rating are high anyway, no matter how you will permute the students. But it's a huge mistake not to match the abilities, to bring your best students, to bring to the lower level track. And by the time they get to high school, they are 2 or 3 years behind the other track, while their level of ability was guaranteed by COGAT.
Okay. Well, thank you. Have you talked to Mr. Warenga about
I
this?
talked to Mr.
Just
Warenga.
recently, or?
Recently, just Friday,
Okay.
and he didn't seem to be interested in looking at it. You know, when I teach my students and I give them exams at the Paul, and they come to me with the exam and said, "Here is
Okay.
there might be a mistake." I'm willing to look at it
Okay. 'Cause,
and give the student the point if the
I
student
understand.
is
I
right.
understand. And, we try to deal with the programs and the process. We normally don't deal with individual students. I would encourage you to re-engage with Mr. Warenga and the principal of the school, because there's always individual cases and there's individual arguments. And then Mr. Warenga is also the person to talk to about the process itself. And we're always hearing from people. I know we've heard about people at the junior high level too on similar type questions. Dave?
Doctor, my question is, are you, I'm trying to get the point of it. Are you concerned that you felt like your son was misplaced?
Yes.
And
there is also concern that there might be other students. It
Okay.
might be a general thing.
so my question then, I assume that you started with the teacher, right?
Yeah.
And
The teacher is fine. You know, my son went to Montessori school, so he was third grade level before he started first
so
grade.
when you talked to the teacher, they were responsive and got your
Yeah,
son
yeah.
placed where he
Yeah.
should be?
The teacher rated highest, you know, he gave him the highest number of points.
Mr. Weeks, I'll meet with Mr. Warenga later this week. We've already spoken once, and we'll review the process. We'll ensure that the appropriate process was followed and all the protocols were followed, and that the placement's appropriate, and we'll follow through with
Now-
Dr. Katui.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back. Okay. As always, in case someone didn't know or didn't get a chance to put in a request, is there anyone else that wanted to make a public comment? Come on up. And if you could, just sit by the mic. You probably left it on. And start out with your name and address for the record and proceed with your comments.
Okay. My name is Karen Tapman. I live at 5 South Columbia Street in Naperville. And my comment is quick. I'm here with 5 other women. Oh my goodness. Well, not that quick. I just wanted to say that I'm here with five other women. We all have children that, some are in the system, but we all have children that are going to be entering kindergarten in the next year, 2 or 3, and we're here to support all-day kindergarten and anything that the board can do to get that proposal passed. Even if it's on an optional basis, it'd just be great to have that option for our kids like the other districts that neighbor our community.
Okay, thank you. And just to be clear, there are no proposals yet, but this is just the beginning of the discussion. But I appreciate your comments. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on to superintendent staff reports.
Great. I'm going to defer the report to Tim Warenga and Molly Farmer, who will speak to the Board of Education and Community tonight regarding the state testing data and our school report card. You're going to see about to see a very thorough presentation and overview of the data before us. So, Tim, Molly, we'll turn it over to you.
Good evening. I'd like to first of all introduce Molly Farmer, who's my Director of Research and Analytics in the Assessment Office Department. Molly and I would like to share with you the data from the state assessment, as well as share with you some of the process and procedures that we put in place since we started looking at this data this year. First of all, as a summary, we'd like to share that Naperville is holding steady. We are a high-performing district, and we're always looking for ways to improve. So we'd like to, this evening, share with you the data in a little bit different look than maybe we have in the past, so that you can see some of how that looks in terms of how we can improve as a district. So we'd like to highlight some of those things and how it also has motivated some of the work that is already in progress in the district since we started looking at the data in the summer. I'd like to share with you just a quick summary about the assessment philosophy for District 203. Some information is up on the screen for you. we'd like to really emphasize that the assessment process is part of the instructional process. We use multiple pieces of summative data as part of the process of making decisions, but we also make sure we emphasize formative data as part of the instructional process to inform how we look at each individual student, and also it informs the process of knowing our students, and the assessment for learning process is still a bedrock of what we do in the district. What we'd like to do tonight, though, really does summarize the state assessment summative data for our district. On the screen, you see the state data that we have, that we give the state tests in the different levels. In grades 3 through 8 and grade 11, we give reading and math in the different levels. Also, at grades 4, 7, and 11, we also give science as a topic for assessment in the state system. Also, as part of the system, we give in the Prairie State exam, the first day is the ACT, the second day is a work keys test, and as part of that process, where the state is adding this next year in 2013 a third work keys assessment that will contribute to our students being able to potentially earn a National Career Readiness Certificate from ACT. Now, the potential we see in this certificate is that it will allow our students to be able to be identified and even be put into a database where business and corporations can look and see how, our students and their qualifications. Arnie Duncan, a little over a year ago, said to the school districts that we need to be looking at the post-secondary options for our students, and not only in terms of how we encourage our students to go on to post-secondary degree options to earn that degree at a university or a college or some other trade school, but also to look into the certificate options for our students to provide for their career readiness goals for the future, and how businesses may be able to look at them, see what their skills are, and be able to use that as part of the identification process for the students. The additional test will be called Locating Information. It's a 45-minute test. It has 38 questions long, and it's focused on how students read and gather information from graphics in information given electronically. On the screen, you will see the state benchmarks for AYP and how those are determined. These are the state levels in order to make AYP for schools and districts. As you can see, we're at the level of 85% for meet or exceed for subgroups for achievement. Back in 2003, when No Child Left Behind started, the first benchmark was set at 40%, and they did equal steps to raise that percentage over the course of the years from 2003 up to when they projected by 2014 it'd be at 100%. So this last year, the state of Illinois was able to get a waiver to keep that percentage. From this past year, it was at 85%, and again this year it was at 85% as well. That's the state waiver listed on your screen. Also, we've got information in your packet about Safe Harbor, and just to briefly outline what Safe Harbor is, and you can also read in your packet. Safe Harbor is where when a subgroup does not make AYP for 2 years, then a target is set to show growth so that a school or a district does not have to make up all the difference in one single year, but gives them a measured step, a process for showing growth in order to make AYP for the next year. So Safe Harbor is an extra target as part of that process. We'd also like to share with you how our district did. So the district summary is shown graphically on the screen, and this will be kind of what we'll do a lot this evening. Is we'll take the district data and try to show it to you graphically in terms of how we've done. The blue bars are how the state performance and the state requirement is for AYP. The red bar above that is how we've achieved past what the state requirement is for AYP in these different measures. As you know, this is the overall measures that are listed up here. As you know, there are many indicators that a district and also schools must make in terms of AYP. This year, District 203 was measured on 363 indicators, and this year we made 334 of those indicators, which is a slight increase over last year's benchmark listing. The next screen tells you a little bit about some information that is found on school report cards, just as some background. On school report cards, they often list in the top right-hand corner a little bit of information about status. The state status information is if a school does not make AYP for 2 consecutive years, they go on academic early warning. If they are also a Title I school, they would then qualify for federal improvement status as well. If a school falls into federal improvement status, they are then required to submit a plan in the state system, which is called Rising Star, for their school improvement plan, which, as we had when we shared the school improvement plans, we mentioned we'll be coming back to you with the Mill Street plan in that system, as well as some information about the district plan in that system. Also, school choice must be offered then, which we did this year for Mill Street. And then if a school is in federal improvement status for a 3rd year, then they have to also offer supplemental educational services at that time. What we have on the screen now is what the AYP summary sheet looks like for the district. Each school also has a very similar AYP form. What we'd like to do is to take this data and break it down for you in some graphical representations so you can see how it looks in terms of how our students did. And again, we'd like to take a look at it in some different ways, including how our schools did in terms of benchmarking. But first, we'd like to share with you how our different levels did. In elementary school, our AYP status was that 11 out of our 14 elementary schools made AYP this past year, which is a celebration. That's a high percentage of schools making that. We also want to point out that the larger the school, the more likely they are to have subgroups identified. You need 45 students in a subgroup in order to be identified in that. And so you can see some of the subgroups as well as other groups that these schools that did not make AYP were listed and qualified for. We want to point out, though, just because a school did not make AYP for a certain subgroup, that doesn't mean, in terms of how we're presenting this material, that every single student in that subgroup did not make AYP, did not make adequate yearly progress. Many of those students not only met, but they also exceeded standards. As with all of our other subcategories, we had students who not only did very well, showed excellent progress, as well as some that struggled as part of the process. Next is our junior high AYP listing. We had one school that made AYP that did not last year, so was able to show growth and make AYP, and that was Lincoln this year. And then we also list the other schools in terms of the expectation. Also, we'd like to point out that there's the way that a school can make it through Safe Harbor is that they decrease the number of students that didn't make it by 10% a year, which is what we have in many of the cases of schools then making AYP the following year. And then lastly, our high school AYP. Both of our schools at the high school did not make AYP this year. We list the groups that, the subcategories that they did not make it in. We'd like to point out that out of the state of Illinois, only 11 high schools made AYP this past year, and they often were in smaller districts where maybe they didn't have as many subcategories or subgroups identified. We'd also like to point out that this year only 18% of school districts across the state made AYP. Also, only 34% of all schools made AYP this year. So when we look at our schools and how they did, we're pleased with the progress of many, but we also see that as a call to improvement for our other schools in terms of how we're doing.
Over the next several slides, you're going to see visualizations from our new data analytics tool. It's called Pinnacle Insight. We trained our administrators and staff this year during our annual data spa, and we are also continuing our learning on Institute days and during staff meetings. You'll notice that the vertical scale is a percent, and every year when a student takes the state test, they get their own individual scale score, and the state will release each year cut scores that put each student into 4 different categories. So the blue is exceeds, the green is meets, the yellow is does not meets, and the red is academic warning. And you combine the meets and the exceeds is what the state determines a proficient level, and that's the percent that's on the top of every bar. And as Tim had mentioned earlier, the state target this year is 85%. So we're going to go through each grade through the subjects reading, math, and then science. Something to also keep in mind when you're looking at these graphs is that it's non-cohort data, which means we're looking at 4th grade every year, but that means that's a different group of kids in every single one of these bars. This is 5th grade reading, 6th grade reading, 7th grade reading, 8th grade reading. You'll notice for 11th grade reading, we have different proficiency levels than we did for 3rd through 8th grade. That's because the 11th grade test is the Prairie State exam. It has a higher level of rigor than the ISAT, which is given in grades level 3 through 8. And actually, the state is working on leveling the playing field between the ISAT and the Prairie State for next year. You'll notice as we go through math that the percents are slightly higher than the reading. This is 3rd grade math. 4th grade math, 5th grade math, 6th grade math, 7th grade math, 8th grade math, and as we get to 11th grade, remember that this is the Prairie State, so higher level of rigor is accounting for the lower rate of proficiency. For science, remember it's only given in grades 4th, 7th, and 11th grade.
Next, we'd like to take a look at our data from a point of view that's a little different. We've been asked in conversations we've had with the Board of Education in the past to not always just compare the data to our state averages, but we've always looked at this data in comparison to some other higher performing districts. What we've done as a area, we've looked at similar large unit school districts. The list you see in front of you are the districts that we have often taken into account as to comparison, and we'd like to take a look at how we've compared to those districts over the years, and also how we can maybe learn from some of the progress that they've had and use that as we project our own progress and make our own plans. The benchmarking has been made primarily on many of the demographics that we have listed in front of you. We want to point out that these subgroups that are listed are the ones that are defined by the state that we must monitor and are reported on the state report card. We also want to make sure that we take a look at this information so that if we do see needs in different areas, it shows us where we might need additional supports in different areas of our subgroups. And next we have subgroups that are also listed on the state report card and how they are in the different benchmark districts, including the economically disadvantaged, the LAP, which is also our ELL population, and then our IEP, which at times you'll see the state report card actually refers to either IEP in some cases, and sometimes they refer to them as students with disabilities. Certainly.
These last 2 slides that we've just looked at, what's this telling me?
Okay, this is just telling you that this is the population percentage. So, for instance, out of at Naperville 203, the white population is 68.7%.
Gotcha.
So it is
if you wrote
straight
left to right, it's
demographics.
100.
Yes,
Got it. Okay,
straight
sorry.
demographics in terms of these percentages.
Thank you.
So we're not sure how or when the different districts are communicating their results to their community. So you'll notice that we have taken off their names on these slides because it's not our intention to call out the different districts, but it is our intention to analyze our data through a different perspective. So you'll see that Naperville 203 is the green triangle. Then we've labeled the districts A through F, and then the state average is that turquoise with the asterisks. So we are looking at our first benchmark slide, shows the ACT composite. So you'll notice that the scale score for the ACT is actually 1 through 36. And you'll notice on the next several slides that we didn't include the entire range. We did not start at 0, and we did not go all the way up to the maximum. We tried to zero in or narrow in onto the range that was pertinent to those scores so that you could see the difference between us and our benchmarking districts. For 2012, our ACT composite was 25.3. A composite score of 25 puts us in the 79th percentile, which means half of our kids are in the top quartile for ACT. The next two slides go back to that percent to show you percent meets and exceeds. This is all state tests, like Tim had mentioned earlier. That's the ISAT, the Prairie State, and the IAA. And Naperville is the green triangle, and the state average is the turquoise asterisk. And we did want to point out we chose these school districts particularly because we felt like they were high performing. And here is math.
Can you explain why not being consistently throughout the ACT and then when we go AYP, not so much? To me as a layperson, it's just inconsistent. I'm sure there's something.
And it's also has to do with how these are labeled and actually analyzed. If you think about an average score for the ACT here talks about where the middle of our categories are, whereas the state testing is a completely different rating and scale, since it's those who meet and exceed as part of that. So later on, we'll actually talk about how the rigor of the ISAT will be changed next year, and once that rigor is changed, which will make it more difficult to get a meets and exceeds next year in the ISAT testing, it'll be interesting to see how that also changes the perspective of these as well.
Somewhat, there's a median and average.
I also want to point out the ACT is taken in the 11th grade as part of the Prairie State, and then when we look at all state tests on the reading and the math slides, it's grades 3 through 8 and 11. So that is some of the differences as well. So that was reading, and then this one was math.
Okay, and the next slides we're going to talk about, we've labeled them the achievement gap slides, and one thing we want to point out is when we look at this data, we want to make sure we take a look at what information it provides for us, because it's important when you look at data like this, it's groups of students, but it's also important to know that this gives us an insight so that we can then drill down to individual students. We've been working with Joe Murphy for a year and a half, and he's been talking to us about how to look at information like this. Joe Murphy tells us that while this group definition is critical, equally important is the reality that equity must be determined one student at a time. So this really does provide us with information, but really it gives us insight to be able to drill down into individual students. Please do note in terms of this scale that again the scale has changed, and we'll point that out when that happens on these graphs. We're going from 60 to 100% on this. This is the percentage of meets and exceeds. So when we look at this, it is actually, when you look at the percentage of students in these categories who actually met on the state test or exceeded on it. It's also important to remember that these subgroups are defined by the state, and in 2011 there was a significant change in those categories. In fact, starting next year we will start with 2011 and go forward from there, because when they categorize the different students, you can see that some of the bars up here stop. Some of them start at 2010 and 2011. As an example, up until 2010, we had Asian Pacific Islanders together. As of 2011, the Asian students have their own subcategory, whereas the Pacific Islander students are actually categorized with Native Hawaiian students. So there is a difference there, and it also brings into contrast these different categories. Like our 2 or more races, in 2010 to 2011, we saw about a 50% increase in that subcategory because of the recategorization of those groups.
These slides are just 203, right?
That is correct. So the middle section here is to take a look. When we look at achievement gap information, we want to look just at our students as part of it.
You mentioned that there's a change between 2010 and 2011. Obviously, I assume that explains why the Asian Pacific Islands jumped up. Why did the black population drop?
Well, in essence, it's difficult to answer that question because of the way when we've looked at this data and we've looked at it very hard. It's difficult to determine, except if you look at the 2 graphs. Actually, the one that does increase quite a bit is the 2 or more races one. The one that, if you look at that, and so one explanation could be that as you look at the different groups, students were recategorized in different populations, which is another reason why we want to in the future start with 2011 and move forward from there in terms of how we look at this data. Okay. Also, keep in mind that the state average for reading was at 75% in terms of state average overall here. Okay. And next, we look at the actual math data with the same categories listed. Again, with the new cut scores that we'll see next year, we'll also be looking at this information in a new light and see how that helps us with understanding our students and monitoring achievement gaps. We're trying to be proactive and plan ahead in terms of how we look and work with our students individually in terms of their needs. Also, I want to point out that when we worked with Joe Murphy, he talks to us about how we can work with some of these challenges. And some of the information he talks to us about is making sure that we apply value-added learning in these situations, which means not only are we trying to close gaps, but for all students, we're trying to make sure that we enhance the learning of all of our students and add to their abilities and also their achievement. We also want to feature balanced instruction, which includes culturally responsive pedagogy. Also, we wanted, Joe Murphy tells us to develop a cohesive assessment system for collecting and analyzing data, which is what we put in place with our new Pinnacle Insight system. And then also to develop a culture of high academic press and high personalization as part of the way we look at the needs of these students in these different categories. Just as a reference here, just so you know that in mathematics, the average score is 80% at the state average. Next, we'd like to look at some of our subgroups, and here we do return to looking at kind of the benchmarking information in terms of these different subgroups. Reading with our ELL population, notice the change in scale goes from 40 now up to 90 in terms of what our scaling is. Again, Naperville is the green triangle on this scale. On the next one, our reading of students with disabilities. Again, looking at this and the information it provides, as well as how it helps us with our plans and our challenges for our district. We'll talk a little later about how we're responding to some of these needs. And then next is our reading for economically disadvantaged students as part of this graph. Next, we look at the math for our ELL students, our LEP students. And then we look at our math for our students with disabilities. And lastly, we'd like to look at, again, it's the one with the green triangle as part of the graph. We look at math for our economically disadvantaged students on this graph. We do want to point out when it comes to working with this information and also the challenges it provides, that really there are no magic bullets in terms of how we meet the needs provided on these slides, and there are really no short-term solutions. This is something that we have to be looking at as an entire system in terms of how we approach it. Also, we need to make sure we look at those students who are in need and how we can accelerate their learning in order to bring them to the next level. Another important point that we need to keep in mind is that prevention always trumps remediation as part of this process. And then also why we approach this in terms of how we go to our local schools and do school improvement plans is that the local context is important in terms of how we approach this. Any strategy could work differently in different situations. So it does, local context is very important in how you look at these and apply solutions.
Next, we want to highlight some changes that are coming from the state. The first slide pertains to the 5 Essentials Survey. This is also sometimes referred to as the Climate Survey, and Dan has spoken to this before. We are going to use the results from this to inform the Diversity Action Plan. This survey was developed by the University of Chicago Impact Group. It's based on 20 years of experience with over 300,000 student responses. The state is providing the survey, and a point of note is that next year 2 of the indicators will be on our school report card to indicate our climate. All certified staff, EC12, will be taking this survey, and also all students in the 6th through the 12th grade. The 5 essential areas are ambitious instruction, effective leaders, collaborative teachers, involved families, and supportive environment. We're going to use the results when we get them back to inform our school improvement process so that we can make sure we're having good growth. The other changes coming from the state is in January, they will release new cut scores. So those 4 categories that they place students in, there will be different numbers that will be drastically different from before. The state is saying that they will expect to see only about 50% of students meeting or exceeding on the state test. And that's what we had talked about, leveling out the ISAT and the Prairie State, so the level of rigor is more continuous across the whole experience, 3 through 11. What the state has recommended is that we look at our 11th grade performance, and this is kind of an early indicator to us how our school district will perform when they release the new cut scores. Again, they're going to give us the new cut scores based on the 2012 results that we just went over, so we can anticipate our 2013 results and what they will look like. There will also be Common Core items. About 20% of the items on the state test in reading and math will be written to the Common Core, so that is also going to increase the rigor of the state tests. And this is something that we're going to work in collaboration with the state as they come out with changes. We're going to make sure that we're not just looking at 1 year's worth of data, but we will look back historically with the new cut scores to make sure that we can stay ahead of all of these changes.
And as we start bringing our presentation to a close, we'd like to talk about some of the things that are not only happening, but also some of what is happening in our district in terms of the state testing and our responses to it. What you see in front of you on the screen is the 2014 Park Assessment Schedule that we're heading toward. Park is the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. It's the consortium that Illinois is a part of. So what we'll be able to now do in the future, starting in 2014, is not only benchmark our information according to how we do with similar districts in our state, but also we'll be able to do that across the nation. We'll be able to look at similar information because the students will be taking the same test, and that will allow us to see how our students are doing on the Common Core, but also how they're doing in comparison to other districts. As you see up here as well, since this is in alignment with college and career readiness, we're also still continuing as part of our plan to include the EPOS system as part of it. We are still going to be giving the Explore test in 8th grade as part of our assessment to inform how our students are doing and help them as they plan for high school and then for colleges as a follow-up. Explore is an ACT series test that is followed up by the plan assessment. The state has asked that we move the plan assessment to the fall of the 10th grade year. We have traditionally given it in the 9th grade year, and we're moving it to November of their 10th grade year. That way it actually gives us a very unique look for the 10th grade year as they prepare for when they start looking at their college entrance exams, is we can now get a very early look at how they're doing using the plan in terms of their college and career readiness. And then later in the year, we'll be able to look at the practice ACT that we own, give them that assessment, and see how the students are progressing over the course of that year. And again, giving us information that we can then do individual work with our students to prepare them for the college and career system. In our district, this is some of the things that we've responded as we started getting to the data over the summer with our strategic planning academies, started looking at it, not only at a school level in the school improvement process, but also at a district level. And as you've heard from some of the work that's being done by Learning Services with Dr. Hester and also in Pupil Services with Dr. Foley, we've been trying to involve in the school improvement process a multi-level system of support where both Learning Services and Pupil Services have been going to the schools and talking about how we can support at many levels our students and what that support could look like. And then also what culturally responsive practices could look like. And when we look at culturally responsive practices, it can be essential for us to make progress with our individual students. There are 3 essential interdependent components of that process: high quality instruction, balanced assessment, and collaboration amongst our staff. That will allow us to involve more people in the continuous improvement process, not only teachers, but also we can then look at the data for individual students so that we can use these evidence-based practices to help our individual students. We'd like to thank you for allowing us to present the data for the state testing and would like to ask if you have any questions about it.
Tim, thank you. That was well done. What did you learn from this?
I've been enjoying working with our new analytics system because what is different is that we've always been able to look at data from a very high level and really engaging not only with our district folks but also our schools now to really drill down and look at individual students is enlightening. It shows us that not only is the important things that we do with students about the students, but it helps us see the story of what's going on with each of these individual students. So really for me it's been a learning process about individual students and how we can respond to them.
Any surprises?
I would say that a surprise was that looking at, for instance, we looked at the economically disadvantaged students, and we actually had some interesting data there where we were seeing some upticks in the mathematics, which I wasn't expecting going in, and we saw that some of the things that we've been doing with some of our economically disadvantaged students has actually been showing some fruit in the process.
Value-added education. Can you explain what that looks like in maybe 4th grade math or something so
Sure.
that it doesn't just sound like words?
Sure. Basically what that means to us is that if you've got a student who is, say, performing at a level below what we would hope at a 4th grade level, part of our charge is to work with that student to accelerate their learning as part of that. So in order to, if we want to say close an achievement gap, we want to make sure that as we're accelerating that student forward, we're not just concentrating so much on that and then bringing everybody else down to that level, but there's still a value add where every single student, we're looking at their growth and trying to get that year's growth in a year's time, and for some students looking for what more than a year's growth would look like in a year's time.
And so when you look at the reading for economically disadvantaged, we're really in the middle of that pack. And you look at the Burgundy district with the squares, and it's much above us. That's on page 39 of the 46 slides. Do you reach out to them, find out what they're doing? How do you utilize our benchmark districts to help our students?
We haven't yet formulated those kind of connections and collaboration. That's been a piece that Molly and I have been able to enjoy over the last few weeks in reaching out just to talk to them about the fact that we would like to share data on this kind of level, and then also be able to, in the future, possibly have some of those kind of collaborations. On a different sense, we do have some groups formulated by the ROE that gather some of us together, but usually they're for formal meetings, so we'd like to sometimes get down to this kind of data level about, just like a professional learning community does for a teacher to teacher, we should do it for district to district to say, what is it that you're doing? How is that in response to different subgroups of students, and how is that having an impact, and how might that be applied in our arena as well?
And when you went over the basic demographic sheets, it said 51% of our students in the state are economically disadvantaged?
Correct.
Wow.
What's Chicago?
Does Chicago count? Chicago doesn't count in our...
East St. Louis and downstate and the Decatur, and that's...
But Chicago counts in the state statistics, does it not?
Yeah, but it's not just Chicago. I mean,
There's
that's
a lot of other areas.
Rockford and...
Question, Tim. Obviously, you took the labels off of these and went alphabet because it's for public consumption. Obviously, you're looking at them with labels because I assume some of those discrepancies, in other words, you may take one subgroup, but there might be economic overlays and stuff that affects that too, right?
Yeah, and we have to look again, local context makes all the difference,
Yes.
and so we need to make sure we're looking at what that context is and seeing if it has an impact.
Am I tracking 10 years from now? I don't know what the number is. If it's 10 years, 5 years, 20 years, these labels are going to be fairly meaningless. Hispanic, black, white. I'm assuming there'll continue to be more, interracial mixing. So the economic brackets are probably going to become more of the subgroups, true or false? And are we preparing for that? I mean, are we trying to identify those things that are going to be problematic for years to come, or just shooting at what is here today?
I think what we can't necessarily predict what will happen in the future in that regard, but we can use what we projected as like the assessment systems in order to say, let's be proactive in gathering the data at the point of time, and then that will allow us to be proactive in meeting the needs of our kids.
We've had the ability, we've been talking with our data spas, the ability to go in and look at pretty specific information about our students and to be able to identify issues, that have erupted as long as they've been with us. And at the same time, we've seen this decline in our economically disadvantaged students and Hispanic and black students. So if we've had the ability for a while, why haven't we been doing that? Where's the disconnect there?
The new system allows us to take and not always have to, for instance, put it, say, in a spreadsheet and try to create a way of looking at the data. This actually allows us to look at students and then look at them in different assessments, so look at multiple measures for those students. So we have had the ability to do it, but oftentimes it took so much number crunching for some of our school administrators, it wasn't coming down quickly enough to those school improvement teams to be able to look at it. This year, again, maybe one of the celebrations that we had was to see the school improvement teams be able to get down to the data very quickly, and they actually shared that with us. They shared kind of an aha after the data spa was done, saying this is the first time that we've actually been able to use the data at the data spa. Now that's hard to say, but that's because they've had to in the past be doing a lot of number crunching to put things actually together for it. So it's gotten us to the information quicker.
And what are we, I mean, but since I've been around so long, we have talked about those data spas and the capacity they give us. I understand that this is much more real time. So how do we have once you have the data, do we have the processes in place that we can support our educators to get that information and to actually get to those students to provide them the support that they need? Are we at that point, or are we going to be saying in another 2 years, now we can do that?
Well, and it's a system that takes place over time, and I might defer a little bit to Dr. Hester and also Dr.
I'm
Foley.
looking at her over your
shoulder.
shoulder.
And I just want to highlight that part of Dan's vision for us when it comes to taking the work of Joe Murphy and putting it in place was to actually get the whole team deployed out to the schools, working with them, and able to put in place things like professional learning, also the tools that they need, like we were talking about here, and also the multi-level systems of support in order to provide that for our students. And then I will defer if they'd like to add on to that.
What I'd like to add on is I just want to reiterate one of the points that Tim's saying. The information is out to all of our teams at the schools. So with that information this year, some of the requests that we've had are, can you get us more professional learning on meeting the needs of all kids? Can you help us understand the types of the types of intervention that we can provide? We've had specific. This is new, and I've only been here, for the past school year. But one thing is specific requests. Can we have support with comprehension, with word study, specifics in numeracy for math or in the curriculum? I think those are things that point to a couple things. One is information on the data we've always had, then more detailed information and use on performance series. So I think those are some of the things generating those questions. So if in thinking about what are we doing now, we're starting to offer and provide professional learning. We are working most directly with our principals on understanding that multi-level system of support, making sure that we have consistent structures and practices in the schools. And then we are also working in a very targeted way through the math and literacy curriculum development process. So those processes respond to the need of data, but then they also use our curriculum as data as well to say how does the curriculum match up with what we're seeing in kids, and then how do we respond through curricular changes.
And I had the pleasure of talking with Mary Baum over at Mill Street, and she's done some really interesting things with her grade teams and the specials to provide some more time, and I guess the teachers have really appreciated it, that we provide our principals with the flexibility to adapt to their communities as they see fit, and to be innovative in their own schools, that we can continue to do that and give them the information to do that, because they know their students and they know their teachers, and they know what works. I hear the consistency that we're doing that. I think there's an expectation that's there, that I hope is there, that they can innovate within that structure.
Right. Our whole focus on working on the laws of school improvement and then the system of practice is that it provides a lot of flexibility for the principals.
Thank you.
Tim, this has been really informative. A question I had, these benchmark districts, have they been using the same software program? How do you get their information?
Straight off their school report cards. So It was made public on November 1st, and we were able to collect
so this is all report card. Are they doing the same? Are they drilling down? Are they using these analytical tools like you are?
Some are, some aren't.
That would be, I think, a real interesting
Yeah.
roundtable to have. to
Absolutely.
learn from some of their, or some of the information that is really beneficial but doesn't look that way at face value, or pitfalls they've had. So none of these other districts, to your knowledge, are.
I don't know that. So,
okay.
So I do know some are using common assessment systems like we're doing, and I know of some other ones, not these specific ones. For instance, that are using different data analytics. We work very closely with 204, and we know that Patrick Knowlton over at 204 does a lot of data analytics with his staff as well.
Good. Thanks.
I think I know how to do this by now. Along those same lines, I mean, there's some heartening data in here that I think you referred to earlier regarding some of the economically disadvantaged, and there's some challenging data in here, both reading and math. Not only us, but across all of our benchmark districts with our students with disabilities. Those trend lines are, I mean, even at a state level, they're going down. Do we talk? And I think you may have said this earlier. Do we talk amongst districts? Do we compare these kind of results and talk about improvement plans, comparisons of data, things like that along these sort of things? Because it looks like I would take from this that maybe we did with the economically disadvantaged, and are we doing that now with our children with disabilities?
We do it in different settings. Like, for instance, in the mathematics one that we're talking about, there's a lot of conversations that are happening between the leaders in our mathematical arena with other districts that are included in this, and also the DuPage Valley, and having those conversations. So it does happen at a level. It's also something that I think each of us are trying to get better at in terms of, because I do a lot of work with Patrick Knowlton over in 204. He's one of our go-to folks in terms of who we talk over. But there are other great resources here that we have not tapped like we could.
It's a lot of good information. As the conversation's gone on, I've gotten puzzled. We talk about real-time numbers and how quick we're getting the numbers. I mean, there are no real surprises from year to year in these numbers. You don't think that the numbers are going to be drastically different there's a couple of subgroups that need big help. So I guess I'm puzzled why that's held us back, not having the rapidity of the numbers. Aren't these numbers going to be most effective now, telling us whether what we're doing is working as opposed to diagnostic?
Well, I think what's held us back is not being as real time as we could be. We're looking at trying to move to a system that doesn't diagnose what is in the past, but looks at what the growth could be in the future. And let me just point out, for instance, a kind of a simple example of that. We've had a tool in our district called Performance Series for many years that we've used at one grade level, at 7th grade, and it's been something that we've used effectively there. This year, we just implemented it at grades 3 through 8 universally, and we gave it in the fall, and we're going to give it in the spring. And what it allows us to do is we can look at the data in the fall, and then we can project growth, anticipated gains for students, and then we can measure them along the way to see if they're meeting those gains. So we don't have to wait 1 year to make that kind of diagnosis of what's going on with our kids. But instead, with our students, we can look at them along the way and see if we can improve the growth, see it earlier, and improve the growth on a much more micro level.
Measuring progress and intervening
earlier.
I mean, RTI, for lack of better terms. But obviously, we need to focus on economically disadvantaged, and those probably overlap with people of color. Right? I mean, we don't need numbers to tell us that, right? So what you're saying is these are going to be helpful in us measuring the individual students more than the groups, is what we're saying.
This data gives us macro information, allows us to drill down to the individuals.
Thanks.
Yeah.
If I could, one thing that's always bothered me is, these subgroups, because subgroup I'm worried about is the one that's not performing well, and you alluded to it with the individuals, and I know you didn't create the subgroups, the state did. I love what you're saying about the individual. My question is, with this data, if a new kid comes in the school district and he happens to be white or Hispanic or Asian, are you saying that we have a program where you treat him differently because of that? And also, in addition to that, you can answer these together, the kid that's been in the school district since kindergarten, do we really care what subgroup he's in? And I love what you're saying about the individual, but we keep on talking about these subgroups, and if we take care of the individual students and do the best for each single one, do we really care about the subgroups other than from a societal standpoint?
Yes and no. You ask a very difficult question because it's a both answers. When we see the students in a macro level and see the subgroups, what it starts is just the process of going down and seeing what the individual needs are. It might help us with, for instance, let me give you a different category than the ones listed here. I was just at a school today, an elementary school, and they were talking about a student who was in their school who is having difficulty and is failing, and that student actually has needs because they are not in their home. They're actually being watched over by a different family. That gives us information about what the needs of that student is, because that student might not have the same care when it comes to getting their homework done. Maybe it might impact what's happening in terms of how much reading they might have to them at night. That sort of information might give us at least a start to explore a little bit about what's happening with individual students, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's precisely the same for each student in that group.
I agree with that, and in your case, it doesn't matter what state subgroup he belongs to. So shouldn't we treat every kid like that?
We should, and it does allow us, again, it really does say, we have this information. Let's see if we can use it to look at if it provides us any information toward meeting the needs of those individuals. I know there are some culturally responsive practices that we can use in order to do that. I'm actually going to defer to Dr. Foley to help share a little bit, because she's taught us some about that as well.
I think one of the benefits of looking at this information, we're looking at it now in a different way. And it's not just one student at a time. We're looking at schools and the makeup of each individual school. We're able to look at information and make informative decisions, and not because we care necessarily about the subgroup. Rather, we're looking at it from a systemic way of our overall district improvement and our school improvement, and then looking at different groups of children, regardless of subgroup, with the benchmarking pieces. And I think that's where the powerful pieces of the data have really benefited us already. We're making real-time decisions now, so we don't have to wait for a magic test to come out. We're actually using data in a way that's informing instruction. You can change instruction within your day, within your week. And the professional practices that are coming around the table and talking about groups, talking about how do you change instructional strategies and approaches and the differentiation. And I will say that it's for children who are exceeding, meeting, and are below. So when Tim talks about that value-added piece and the growth models that are going to be coming, we're looking at all student groups, and even the high achievers. We have to make sure that they're making their growth within that year as well. So it's a really exciting way for us to start to look at data and have those conversations.
Okay. The other thing was Jim was kind of kind on this one, talking about how everybody was going down. I see us going down more than the average, and that would be with disabilities. You said you were going to talk about some specifics, but I may have missed them. Using this program where we seem to be dropping off more rapidly than any other students with disabilities in both reading and math, what what conversations have you had already, and are they just conversations, or what concrete changes are we making to change this course?
Again, I'm going to defer. There are some very concrete things that are happening in terms of how we're doing not only program but also staffing in terms of meeting some of these needs. I don't know, Dr. Foley, if you want to highlight some of those.
So as you know, last year we started with standards-based IEP. So we started to train all the special education teachers and related service staff on the Common Core, the instructional shifts, and writing IEPs, the goals and objectives that are actually based on the content that all students are going to need. We've also started to work on professional development for co-teaching. That means special education staff and general education staff planning together, delivering the instruction together, and that has a lot of potential for that movement as well. And then, of course, having our students actually be within the classroom setting more and more, and really scaffolding those skills. So taking what, let's say, a fourth grade math standard, and they might not be at the fourth grade level. So we have to deliver the instruction in an explicit way at the instructional level and start to build up those skills. And again, the assessment tools that we currently have now are actually diagnostic in that regard. So there's prescriptive pieces in there that we can start to fill in the holes, the gaps. And special education is the gap between where students should be and where they currently are.
Is that what our benchmark districts are doing? Because, for instance, you guys threw the graph up here with math students with disabilities. We're below all the benchmarks.
And is there a reason why it's been declining?
That's the other part of the question. And I know all of a sudden, are you saying that we're going to see this thing go up?
I think you're going to see some changes over time, but I would say that, and Tim pointed this out, with No Child Left Behind, the bar went higher and higher. So while we've been, not just students with disabilities, but while we've been trying to increase that rigor as well, the feds have been moving it up too. So that 100%, by 2013-14, if we don't get the waiver, we had a little bit of a moving target. So we're always working towards that next go.
And I understand that, but I understand the bar's going up, but our performance is going down,
right,
and our performance is below all our comparator districts.
It is not where we want to be.
I understand that. Yeah. Also, why are we there?
I can only tell you that there's a confluence of reasons between the IEPs not being fully aligned with the curriculum, and not being aligned then with the standards, and the service delivery, and that's part of that
I'm going to answer it in a little different way. I don't know that we know the answer right now, but I think the summary of what we've tried to present tonight is that we are taking a more deliberate and purposeful look at all of our students individually, collectively as a large group, and as subgroups of students to identify trends and whatever learning we can get from the data and what the data tells us. Remember, the information that's being presented to you tonight represents one snapshot. It's one assessment or one series or group of assessments, not the only assessment. It is the one that's reported. It's the one that's on our school report card, but it's only a part of what we're looking at, and it's a very important part. In this purposeful and deliberate attempt to look at our data and to use our data on all of our students, we've used this information at each of our sites in our schools to write school improvement plans that target growth and improvement based on the areas in those schools where it needs to happen. You're looking at a comprehensive look at the district. We use the data then within the students within those individual schools to establish our school improvement plans with targeted support for those students based on their needs at their sites. So I guess my answer is that we're working on an answer for that so that the trend line can go the other way. We've recognized, I remember our conversation when we were looking at some of these benchmark districts and saying, gee, I wonder what school C is doing. We need to talk to them and find out what they're doing and bring some of those learnings back here so that we can change that.
Terry?
I saw the same thing that Jim did about the decline, but I also, we're kind of flatlined across those areas. I mean, there's really no market up or down improvement. We've kind of reached a plateau and we're just kind of holding our own. And it's the same thing, the performance from 2009 to 2012, if you look at it across the board, it's within 2 or 3 percentage points, even at the top end. So we've got a pretty consistent model. My question is, what are we doing to shake it up, to move it? Because it seems like we've got the system down, we've got things in a really good holding pattern, but we need to move the other lines. And what I kind of heard Kate say was that we're trying to change how we're teaching and realign the IEPs, which is something I agree with, and maybe we're just not enough rigor in that area.
And the core curriculum is now becoming our alignment with the Common Core, and you can't underestimate the impact that's going to have to the entire body of our students in terms of raising their achievement. The fact that we can take and raise the rigor to that level, I think, is going to have an impact on this. Now, we only have 2 more years of looking at it this way, but I'm interested to see, once we align as we keep moving toward that alignment. I'm going to say kind of a risky thing here, but over the next 2 years, our interest is more going to be toward aligning to the PARCC assessments in the Common Core than it is going to be toward the ISAT meets and exceeds. And so it could be that we will see the results in 2 years rather than we might not see it next year. And that's part of the system change, because we're putting the improvement in the basket of saying it's important for the college and career next step for Common Core.
And would you say overall we've seen more improvement in math than we have in reading? Some of the scores.
I would say there are some areas where we see there's some improvement in mathematics, but there are also some places where we've gone down in mathematics as well.
Is it true, though, that if we're staying level, these are meets and exceeds numbers, and that bar goes up? So if we are 90% here and we were 90% 3 years ago, we actually have improved, because that's 90% that meet or exceed an increasing standard. Now, I guess it hasn't increased the last 2 years because of the waiver, correct? Going back to the disability, does this have anything to do with the fact that we have us in 204, have a substantially smaller population of IEP? Us in Naperville were at 9, and the next closest was 14. That's a 50% difference. Is it that they've gotten sort of lost in the shuffle more?
I'm going to talk about that, and Tim can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to misspeak in how I say that, but I'm going to apply that really to all of our groups. When you look at our demographic data and information about all of our subgroups, we have smaller numbers of students in those groups, which means that a smaller number of students' performance will cause fluctuation on the percentage of their performance compared to some of the other districts.
I mean, that's not language. ELL is not as true. It just leaps out at me. The IEP is really marked. I mean, by 50% on that. The others, I hear what you're saying, but well, it'd be interesting to see.
I'd also like to draw attention. We talk a lot about ISAT here, but also a very rigorous assessment that we have the data on is the ACT, and that data provided here also does show, and that data shows over many years a growth. What we'd like to see is to kind of match that growth in terms of what we're doing with the PARCC assessment in 2 years also, to see that our students are progressing year in, year out toward the Common Core assessment, the PARCC assessment, so that they can make that kind of progress as well.
Okay, any other comments, questions?
I would just summarize my thoughts. I'm glad that you're happy with the tools and the numbers. I think we're all sort of getting at, we don't care as much about the numbers as the individual kids and the progress, and we shouldn't need all kinds of tests to know that those that come from disadvantaged backgrounds are going to need special focus. And I think you're well aware of that. I hear that, but that would underscore where I'm coming from on this.
And I think Dan hit it also. We still have a lot of work to do. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other reports?
No other reports?
Okay. Next is consent agenda.
I move approval of the consent agenda items 6.01 and 6.02 as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Roll call.
Romberg,
Yes.
Yench,
Aye.
Dennison.
Yes.
Crotty.
Yes.
Weeks. Price.
Yes.
Fielden.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, discussion without action. High school course proposals and changes.
Okay, at this time, invite Dr. Hester to come up to do a presentation and provide the Board of Education with a presentation on recommended course proposals and changes for the coming school year. So, Dr. Hester.
Did it die? So did I. Luckily.
All right, good evening, everyone. The purpose of this presentation is to recommend high school course proposal changes for the 2013-2014 school year. The recommendations come from two important processes that are occurring in our district right now. The first of those processes is a curriculum course audit that's occurring in the high schools, and then the EC12, the Early Childhood through 12th Grade Literacy Curriculum Development Process. So we come in front of you every year to do proposals for new courses. But one of the things that we typically don't do is come in front of you to recommend that courses be taken off of our course offering books. So if you take a look at our course offering books at both high schools, you'll see a great number of courses on those books. And basically, our course audit process is there so that we can begin to look at every course and then audit them according to 4 criteria. So the first of those criteria is endurance. And the question that we ask in the course audit process is, think of the marathon or the triathlon. Is this something, an enduring learning that you'll need when you're 20 or you're 30 or you're 40 and so on? So is it important learning for life? The second criteria is leverage. And leverage refers to, are there important contents and concepts in the course that can actually give you leverage in other courses or other areas of learning? And then the next one is readiness. And readiness refers to, does the course content provide you for readiness for the next level of learning? So the next level of learning in that department, in that course sequence, in that pathway, or the next level of learning in our high schools, if that's for college and careers. And then the last one is relevance. And relevance speaks to, are these courses, the content, are they motivating and engaging, and are they relevant for the world of today and for our students today? So those are the 4 criteria that we've been using in the course audit process. That process is being led through a partnership with Learning Services Leadership and leadership at our 2 high schools. And the group of leaders that are really heavily involved in the hard work in that are our high school ICs, and I'd like to give them credit for the work that they're doing in leading that process. So that process is leading to some of the recommendations for today, although you would see more information from that coming in the school year for 14-15. The second process I referred to is our EC12 Literacy Curriculum Development Process. We started that process in January with writing the philosophy. We are at the stage right now where we've begun the construction of instructional units at each grade level or each course level. And we also have started the process of identifying resources to support the teaching of the curriculum and to support students learning in the curriculum. And we are also in the process of identifying the types of assessments that we need for the district benchmark assessments. So those are assessments that are core to all kids who take that course or take that grade level class. And as I said, it's those two processes that lead to the recommendations that I bring forward to you this evening. I just want to go over some other information. When you look at these slides, the blue and the red do not refer to North and Central. It's important to know and clarify that the blue represents 2012-2013 school year, and then the red throughout the presentation represents the 2013-2014 school year. And that will take me back to the first recommendation. This comes through the Social Studies Department. It's important to note that through the course audit process, it is recommended that we make this change for 2014-2015. But we have a group of teachers at North who are ready to go and would like to make this change in the 2013-2014 school year. So currently for our 11th grade and 12th grade students, we offer a semester of Introduction to Psychology and then a semester of AP Psychology. The recommendation that we would like to put forward is to offer a year-long course for AP Psychology. And then Introduction to Psychology will still be offered as a semester elective. Then Central would follow in 2014-15. The reason for that change is the benefits to the students, and that is that right now they receive a half a credit weighted for AP Psychology. They would receive a full credit weighted for AP Psychology in the year-long proposal. And additionally, and more importantly, we feel it's important for the year-long focus to improve their performance in the AP Psychology exam, which is critical and meaningful to their future.
So would introduction still be only offered in junior, well, it says 11th, 12th, junior, senior year?
We would offer it in the junior and the senior year, and it would be offered as an elective.
So they couldn't take it sophomore year?
They could if we could entertain that. We could entertain that definitely. Right now we have it proposed for 11th and 12th. I think it's more that way. We see it as AP Psychology is one AP course that all kids can have access to that AP course and take successfully. And intro is not a prerequisite. That's important to know.
It's not a prerequisite. Intro isn't a prerequisite for AP.
Right. Okay.
You know how every time you add or take away something, it ripples and has effects on other things? So the kids were taking that intro to psychology kind of as A, or sociology. Like those often marry together to become one full year for the kids a lot of times. Like they'll take both of them, right? Mm-hmm. So then does that mean that you'll have less kids taking the sociology, or does that affect kind of that? Because then it doesn't give the kids the opportunity to take sociology as well.
We would have to watch that. We would have to watch that as that happens through enrollment numbers. But basically, we move that intro to psychology as an elective. They have 21 credits total to graduate, and then they would have to work with their electives.
And are kids not doing well on the AP psychology test right now at one semester? Because I know every AP teacher I've ever sat in a classroom with, they'll tell you their exact percentage of how many kids get 5s, 4s, and 3s.
Right.
And I don't think I've sat in any teacher's room that has less than 90% that is up there. I'm just curious, what problem is that solving?
It's not that they're not doing well, it's the trajectory and the pace with which they have to work and focus to do well. So if you have X amount of content to learn in a year versus a semester, you can reflect more, digest more, you can apply and learn. If you can do that over the course of the year versus compacting that into one semester. So we're really looking for an opportunity to expand their learning continuum in that class versus taking it and keeping it at that semester.
Can they still take the AP exam with one semester, or they'd have to take 2 semesters? Before they could take 1 semester of AP psychology and sit for the exam. Now they'd have to take the full year?
I would have to check on that, and I did ask Jackie Thornton and Jeff Howard to come tonight. I think I'm going to ask the two of them to come up because I think that's a good question for them to answer.
I just wondered if say there's, an incredible achieving student who didn't want to commit a whole year, are we now committing them to a whole year? It's only because you brought it up. I don't. It's a lot of details.
Actually, our students now take a full year of. They are required to take the intro semester before they take the AP semester.
Okay.
So that hasn't changed. The difference is now AP is a full year course, so they're getting weighted credit for that full year where they were not.
Also,
previously.
any student can take an AP exam. You don't have to take the course to take the exam. Anyone can pay to take the exam.
Oh, that's true. That's true. You can do independent study.
And because AP, just to go back to Susan's question, because intro and AP were paired as a full year course, they always have been paired as a full year course. I don't think that we'll see impact in the sociology.
Good to know. Good. Thanks.
My only question would be, and I think it is a good idea to have the AP course, a whole year course. I like Introduction to Psychology still there. I think and it may be a very small subsection that you affect. The only people I think you're going to affect are the kids that in the past have taken Introduction to Psychology and gone, oh God, this is boring, I'm out of here. And now they're basically stuck for a year. And that's probably maybe a very small number of kids, but those are the only ones that will be affected by this change as I see it. Would you agree?
Actually, no. We do have that 20-day grace period at the beginning of each semester. Sorry, I
So
have a very
20
little voice.
20 days they got to make up their mind?
Right, where they could also drop second semester for another course offering if it were open at that time, too.
So at that point they would just get a half a credit, or would they?
Right.
Okay. Good enough. Okay, that was just the first one. Okay.
That's all right. We've got kindergarten after this, so.
It's a big night.
I forgot my water, though, but.
We can help
All
you
right.
with that.
So we're going to move into the proposed changes for communication arts. Again, all of these changes come about through the literacy.
Oh my gosh, you're going to float
they're
away.
bringing in the reserves for me. All right.
That one's got cooties.
All right. There are two things that I want to highlight that are reflective of all of the changes that we're presenting and bringing forth for ComArts. One is that you'll see a movement from this emphasis on the previous of semester courses to the idea of moving to year-long courses. And then the other thing that you're going to see in the presentation is a move away from the topical or theme-based course names that we've used in the past to the name recognized and known to more of us, which is English. And
English.
so we do have English language arts standards, and it's not that we don't want to be creative or innovative in our titles. It's that we feel it's important for communication reasons, for parents to know that that it is English, for the community to know, and then also we've had some challenges with the NCAA in accepting courses for student athletes. So that is some of the rationale for the change. I'm going to go through the levels and then invite Jackie and Jeff to add as needed. So for ninth grade, we currently offer patterns of communication. And then for our ninth grade honors pathway, we offer honors patterns of communication. So we are proposing that we move to year-long courses based off of the Common Core state standards and that they be entitled English 1 and Honors English 1. And the emphasis in all of these courses is the integration of the 4 strands in the Common Core, and they are reading, writing, language, and listening and speaking. Listening and speaking being one strand. Moving to 10th grade, we currently offer for the 10th grade strand written communication at both high schools for one semester, and students can take Intro to Journalism at Central, or they can choose to take print communication at North. And then all students then take for the other semester speech communication. And then in the 10th grade honors pathway, we currently offer the choice in the honors pathway of honors journalism at Central, Honors Intermediate Composition, also at Central, or at North, students can choose Honors Written or Honors Print. And then for the other semester, all kids take speech communication in the honors pathway. We are proposing moving forward for 2013-2014 that we move to a choice in the 10th grade pathway of English 2 or English 2 journalism. And in that decision and that choice, then speech would be offered as an elective. And it should be noted that we have a lot of talented and passionate and qualified communication arts teachers right now who are teaching speech and who are doing an excellent job at that. And what we would like to do is to work with those teachers to to integrate very heavily in English 2 a speech focus, but also have them work with those teachers developing English 1 and then English 3 for our 11th graders to integrate those the elements of communication theory into those courses. And then the telltale sign for us that we've done a good job of that will be that we have also integrated those into our assessments and that we continue to see the same progress for speech with the design of an integrated method for speech versus the separate method of having speech for all kids. But again, it is still being offered. It will be offered as an elective. And then in our 10th grade honors pathway, we would offer Honors English 2 and Honors English 2 journalism.
Can you explain how the transportation works if students want to take certain classes at Central or North, or how that day works out for them?
Sure. We typically don't have the students in communication arts that travel between schools. Usually they're specialized electives. AP Art History is a good example. When we are in the staffing process, we identify a course where we have, I'll use AP Art History again as the example. I believe we have 8 students at Central who chose that course this year, not enough for a section to run at Central. There were more students at North, so the course is running at North. We scheduled that course first hour so that students from Central pick up the bus at 7:20, takes them to North for their first period class, and then they come back to Central for second period.
They usually, those periods will run first hour, so we have transportation.
You read the list of the important things that you took into consideration when designing the classes, and one of them was important life skills and relevance, right? So I looked up in seriously 20 places what people's biggest fear is, because I've always heard it's public speaking. And I thought, was it just what I heard, or was it still true? So I looked it up 20 different places, and it was ranked in the first 3 in 19 of those 20 spaces. And I'm just really curious, when you look at speech or taking away speech, and we're talking about life skills and relevance and fear of public speaking, and if it's such an important life skill, why would we put it? Because really, you can write speeches offered as an elective. There's so little time, truly. You know, I look at the class list. I'd love to take lots of these classes. They're so fascinating, from art history to the history of Chicago. But you never have time when you fit in all the things that you have to have.
Well, first, I think it's important that we establish that speech is not being pushed out of our curriculum completely. I mean, it is being offered as an elective. There is an advanced speech course at the senior level. But also, we're encouraging that English 2 full year course contain a great deal of speech material addressing the speaking and listening standards. So, plus, on top of that, due to Common Core, and that's really driving a lot of this, we are going to have to make sure we are addressing speaking and listening skills in all of our disciplines, even PE to some extent. So we feel that all of our kids are going to get it, and it's going to be assessed through the park assessments and through our local assessments.
But there's, Dan, for example, there's other things that we deem very important. We deem that our kids knowing how to swim is so important that we put them in 2 semesters of swimming during their career with us. Are there other things that we deem so important that we decide we want something specialized to meet those goals because we feel that they're life skills?
I can't specifically name something to that direct question right there. I'd like to speak to a couple of things, and I think Dr. Hester and I had an opportunity last week to speak with a couple of speech teachers and learned about some fascinating things and the importance of what they're doing in the classrooms. And Jen spoke to this a little bit about the importance of ensuring that those teachers that are teaching that sophomore year experience are involved in the curriculum planning process for English 2 to ensure that those experiences are being replicated. And then the second point I'd like to make is actually to defer back to Jen and the team to talk a little bit about the feedback that you had regarding the inclusion of all the strands of the LA standards throughout, and that the importance of not taking a break from some of the other strands as well.
Yeah, maybe I could speak a little bit to the process that we went through this summer, too, when we were grouping Common Core skill statements into units of study. I had the privilege
Ms.
of
Thornton,
working...
would you move up?
I'm sorry. I'm not feeling
We are
well, and I
broadcasting
have very little
worldwide, just so
voice.
you know, so we want to make sure worldwide you can be heard.
No pressure. I did, yes. I had the privilege of working with the 10th grade team this summer when they were developing their units of study, and they are teachers who are passionate about speech and the speech curriculum. And through it was fascinating to be an observer because I'm not a content expert, so my expertise I was able to lend to that team was the use of Excel to help them group their standards. So I did that, and so it was fascinating for me to watch the process they went through to take these skill statements and prioritize them and group them in ways that made sense. And the conclusion of that team was that they feel that we do have the elements of what we currently call speech embedded in that course. The difference is that they feel like you can't take it in any order anymore. It has to be second semester of the sophomore experience, and that speaking and listening is one of the 4 elements that the Common Core requires of all students in order for all of our students to be prepared for the grade 11, 12 grade band moving forward. So those teachers this summer really felt good about that decision, but that we were saying it is so important that the work that's done before they're ready for that heavy emphasis on speech had to be there as well.
And I have one more question. The names that you've given the new classes, I've sat here for 7 years and had you say, we need to change these names to fit what the colleges are looking for in the rigor of what our students are doing when they're applying for colleges. And now it's like 180 degrees, and it's like, okay, I'm going to call this English 1. I mean, it sounds like remedial English. Number 2, I mean, it doesn't sound like advanced high school classes. Can you share maybe how those standards are, what they're going to be called? Is that something that other benchmark schools are going to be calling their classes?
We actually looked at a lot of high school course guides and programs, and you will find different things. We're noticing a trend, I don't know if it's because of the Common Core or that no matter what we call our courses, our standards still end up being called English Language Arts. And then I have to say the NCAA thing, is pretty important to us. But in those program guides, you will see English. A lot of them are actually going to coding, like almost like a college, English 100, English, 200. We've also seen English 9, 10, and 11, 12, 9, 10, 11, 12, which speaks to the grade level of the student, but very much of like a coding with a number. And I would say the most common word we've seen is English or English Language Arts.
I just have a couple of questions. It is interesting because at this same meeting every year, I haven't done it as many years as you have, Susan, but in my 6th year, Tim Morenga comes and shows us these and says, well, we need to change this title to get more descriptive. So when I looked at your information too, I thought, well, wait a minute. We go through this each year and we take, whether they're electives or requirements, they're both, and we get them more specific. Now we've gone back the other way. And I guess I'm thrilled you looked at these benchmarks because, we took away ranking to give our kids a better competitive advantage. Our goal here is not to lose that competitive advantage, and hopefully we haven't done that.
So I feel the lesson that we've learned over time is that it's not in the name, it's in the course description. and that is what is important. And so right now you'll see in the proposals that are loaded in board docs, course descriptions that really speak to the content and the skills that students will learn. But then as we continue with the course development process, as we get those resources aligned, and more importantly, as we get the assessments written, that we will even add and create more rich course descriptions that would provide students with the information that they need for colleges.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. But I guess my question is, at the end of the day, your transcript goes with your student. Not everybody's looking at course descriptions. We can't even put that on the school profile. There's not enough room for it. So at the end of the day, I just want to make certain, English is a very rich subject. I mean, I have no problem with that. I just want to make certain that we're not getting out there ahead of the crowd, and our kids won't be at a competitive disadvantage when you're looking at their transcripts. With this terminology, I just don't. I am very concerned with. And my kids are of college age, and I know those transcripts mean a ton. And if Bennett Academy, for example, they do a different grading system, and it does not benefit all the kids. Not everybody understands it. It's a phenomenal school. Not everybody understands it. I don't want us to get in a position where we understand it, and philosophically it all makes sense, and we all feel good about it. The rest of the world doesn't understand it. So that's my first comment. The other one, I guess I want to understand I've heard two sides of this, that we're trying to understand. I understand the passionate teachers. My kids didn't have those teachers. My own personal feeling, I think it was one of the richest classes my kids happened to take. And I hope that this experience doesn't get diluted, because often that happens when you are required to give a speech a week, a speech every 3 days. There is something very powerful about progress that you can't get, because we're going to cover that in social studies, we're going to cover it in other things. So, and I'm very trusting that will all happen. But are we saying we've removed speech as a class because we have to follow Common Core and it's going to be delivered in different ways? I've heard that, and I've also just heard just now that, oh, well, speech is really, in your second year in high school, you're going to have speech in one of those semesters. It's really going to look like the same thing, but we're going to call it English too. Which way is it?
Okay. So what it is we are developing a course called English 2, and that English 2 focuses on the integration of the 4 strands in the Common Core. With that, it still gives us the opportunity to heavily integrate speech into that course, making sure that there are standards for listening and speaking. One of the things that our communication arts teachers have pointed out to us, especially those who teach speech, is that there are standards that are recognized by a communications organization or association about the elements of communication and theory. So we will do our due diligence to integrate those into the curriculum as well. So within the listening and speaking strand, we can also incorporate those standards as well, the ones that actually come from the association. So those are the things that we can do. But we are very clearly proposing a course that integrates those 4 strands. I think one of the most compelling things that I heard from sophomore teachers is that we can't allow our kids to take a break from the integrated experience of those 4 strands. And when their assessment, as we develop assessment items, the ones that we develop, and then as the assessment items are being released for PARC, kids are very much asked to apply reading and writing within the same context, within the same assessment question. The new generation of assessments allows kids to be assessed in different ways. But to answer to your question, we are definitely proposing a course that integrates those 4 strands, but then also adds on to that the elements of communication theory.
And I don't pretend to understand developing curriculum or delivering it. My concern is, and I will get off my soapbox, in many other disciplines, math, you keep relearning things. You learn it in third grade, you see fractions again. You see, kids in first grade learn fractions. Obviously, that looks very different than fifth grade or seventh grade. But they keep seeing it. They keep seeing it. Science the same way, they keep seeing things. But when they have chemistry, it's a very different model than other science classes. So I hear what you're saying. They're going to get this skill, speech, in many different aspects. I don't see it as being as intense or as beneficial as when you get maybe it's the way it was taught at North, as how it was taught. They are life skills, they're interviewing skills, these kids, my kids had interviews for college, and those skills carried them from sophomore year to those college interviews. So I'm very hopeful, let's put it that way, but I'm concerned.
I want to respond to Susan's question about other things that we've integrated, and I think there are a lot of things that we've integrated in curriculum over the years. Working in teams is something that we start with in elementary school. In fact, speech in elementary school, what is it, second grade, that they have to get up every kindergarten first. They have to get up every week and do a speech. Working together in teams is something that we do in every class at some point. My daughter just had a project. And the other thing that we started was the ability, which was our elementary curriculum, was having kids articulate why they came to a solution, which was this meta learning that we did, so that when they reached algebra, they knew how to solve a problem. And we have them do that in everything they do in this meta learning. We have them do it in PE. They have to do their own health plan in PE. We're asking them to think about how they're integrating these things in their lives and to actually regurgitate it and put it on paper, which is tough for our introverts. Writing this stuff down is hard for them, but we have integrated that. We've also integrated an inquiry-based learning model in many of our classes, which is asking questions rather than presenting the information. So I think we have a lot of successful models of how we've integrated it. I like the idea of speech happening in PE. I like the idea of speech happening in chemistry and in biology, that it's not just something that happens, I'm going to do a speech, I take a speech class, and that's when I speak. I hear what you're saying. Learning the elements of speaking is an important part of it. How to do a presentation, how to start off. Learning those elements is an important part of it, but integrating it into everything else they do is really exciting, as long as we can measure that and show that we're doing it. I know one measurement we'll get a call from a parent 3 years from now. It's like, why does my kid have to speak in PE? You're going to have those conversations. And then you start talking about, because we've integrated speech in everything we do. So that's evidence of what we do. I like that idea, but
We've had
are they
speech,
learning
though.
those?
That speech has been in all the different classes. You don't take a history class and not do public speaking, too. And in speech, they write. They defend arguments. They write a lot. So, you know what? A concern noted.
I guess my question, if we are integrating that in English too, what is the speech class teaching them? What's the purpose of a speech class? If those elements, if those things are integrated, what is the speech class teaching them?
So we'll integrate those elements, but then the speech classes moving forward, we have some noted changes and some improvements that need to be done there. And we have not worked on this course yet, so I want to make sure, but some of the things that we know that we have to work on is the level of rigor in that course. We also need to work on the types of things that they're reading and how much they're reading. But it would still focus very much on the elements of communication. It would be in more depth, and then we will work on that through the curriculum development process when we work with electives.
That was actually going to be my question, is if, first of all, I do think it's a good idea. I like integrating it, assuming everything else you said comes to fruition. It is actually evaluated. The points are in there. I'd love to see it spread to math, where, people do get up and explain stuff, but I don't know that it's actually evaluated as such. So the more we do that, the better. But to Susan's point was actually mine. if you keep it, well, first of all, my question would be, do you really need it if you're integrating it? Number two, if you change the course, is it still appropriate to have it as a sophomore while there's a speech emphasis in English 2? So have you put a lot of thought into that? I heard you say it's not done yet. Maybe not even started yet.
The elective process for communication arts actually is happening through the course audit process that Jen described earlier. So first, the curriculum for English 1, 2, and 3 will be complete, and then we'll be able to evaluate the elective offerings and align them as needed in the strands that those ICs have determined.
So is it possible we won't even have elective speech?
We have a course right now called Advanced Speech, which is an elective option.
Which makes sense, yeah.
So I guess I would see Advanced Speech being the elective that we would call speech.
You'll also note, too, that senior year is the combination of 2 electives.
Mhm.
So they're going to have to select some English electives.
No, I mean, I understand. And obviously you're still early in the process. It's first semester now. I understand all that. But it seems to me, just a contradiction of, hey, we're incorporating it all, but we're still going to offer it. That doesn't make sense. And maybe it does make sense at a later point, but I'm not seeing that up on the slides yet. So,
in case it's a question that might be circling, is it's imperative for us to get the first 3 courses of the sequence and that honors pathway, so that then we can start to think about what are the electives and the options and the opportunities that kids need. So that's why we're not bringing everything forward at once.
okay. And the other question was, as you pare down these courses and it gets simpler, and I like English 1 versus Patterns of Communication. I never knew what that stood for until I read the course description. But why are we keeping English 2, English 1 journalism, honors journalism? And I don't mean to, I know we got a bunch of reporters in the room, I don't want to pick on them, but what makes journalism so unique that it deserves a track of its own versus literature, versus writing, fiction writing or something like that?
So there will be a heavy emphasis of fiction and nonfiction writing in both of these courses, and the standards dictate that. But why journalism? And that is because I think it responds to that criteria of relevance. That journalism allows opportunity for media, and it allows opportunity for kids to express knowledge and learning in different ways. It offers, not that you wouldn't have this in English too, but it offers a lot of unique opportunities for engagement in technology and using and representing information differently.
These are the courses that ultimately produce our school newspapers. And at North, we have our media lab. I mean, these classes are occurring here. The journalism classes occur at the sophomore level in order to have students prepared to work in those labs as they get older.
But that would win out over film or something? I'm curious, too, because you think of the journalism world has changed so much.
Right.
So, the print world, anyhow, so...
But I think just because of that, the journalism world has changed, and it allows for, if you look at global literacy, or if you look at in English language arts, there's the communication that's just two-way. There's the communication that's with the people who are in the room with you, or people you have immediate contact with. Then there's communication that rests actually still in your school community, but with outside. But then there's a third level of communication that in today's time that we're really working on, and that is that global level where you communicate. And it's not to say that this won't happen in English too, but that it's an emphasis through journalism that allows us another opportunity and a gateway to get to that third level, which is the global level of communication in English language arts.
That was the second slide.
That was year 2. That was year 2, sophomore.
Okay. All right. So in 11th grade, we currently offer at Central semester courses. That's intermediate composition at Central, and for the other semester, American Lit through 1900s, and then themes in American literature. And then the year-long, and then at North, at North and Central, we have American Studies, which is a year-long course, which is actually a course that exists between our Social Studies department and our Com Arts department. And then we have American Literature offered as a year-long course at North. And then at both schools, we have an AP offering, and that is AP Language and Composition. We are proposing for 2013-2014 that we move to providing at both schools the year-long course English 3, and that we retain our American Studies course, and then that we also continue with our AP option, which is the AP Language and Composition. And because our senior year is primarily where our students pick from electives, that is still in development, and we would come back to you with proposed changes to the senior year for next year, and those proposed changes would be implemented in 2014-2015. And any further questions?
American Literature is in junior year? I thought it was American AP Lit, AP Lang. I thought Lang was in junior year. I don't know.
It's the AP Lit is, most of our seniors take that. Like
Seniors take it, right. It just is listed here in 11th grade, so I was trying to...
Regular Lit.
Oh, regular. I'm sorry. AP Language. Oh, I see. It's the elective side.
Right.
Got it. Sorry, I apologize. I have to learn to read.
So, next meeting we will be
scheduled. The next meeting is scheduled for action.
And the 12th grade courses won't be brought back till next year, is that what I heard?
12th grade courses, they'll either be brought in March or in the spring. They'll be brought in the spring or next year, but our goal is in March.
But right now you're not planning on any changes to the senior course book for 13, 14?
No.
Okay. Any other questions?
I'll just say, as an English major with a bachelor's in English, I like the English moniker on our English classes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I know what's next.
Jeff, Jackie, thank you. You're welcome to stay with Jen and help on the next topic.
Is Jen staying up here?
Jen's staying up here. Our next topic, next report, really serves as a conversation of introduction, or it may be appropriate to call it a conversation of reintroduction. What we hope to do tonight is to reintroduce a conversation with the Board of Education regarding our kindergarten program in our school district. And we'll go right to the next slide so you can kind of begin with the end in mind. And what we'll be asking for here is the authorization for us to begin planning for extended learning time for kindergarten students. Earlier tonight you heard Tim's presentation talk about how we're doing as a school district. And I think based on both your comments and the questions that you asked in the presentation itself, we see that we have students in our school district who could benefit from some support and from some help. You also heard Tim talk a little bit about, and Jen also mentioned, Dr. Joe Murphy, a professor out of Vanderbilt University who we have worked with for a couple of years now, who is an expert in leadership. He's actually the author of state standards that are used that had been used in Illinois, the VALED instrument that's used to provide feedback. Is part of our principal evaluation this year, but he's also an expert on understanding and closing the achievement gap. One of the things Tim mentioned in his presentation and talked about is the importance of early trumps later and the importance of intervening and supporting students as early as possible. We've talked about leverage and we've talked about readiness. And as an administration, we believe we have students in this school district who could benefit and who would benefit from extended time in kindergarten. As a matter of fact, as an administration, we believe all of our students would benefit from it. What we hope to do for you tonight, as I said, is to reintroduce this conversation with you. Jen is going to do the bulk of the presenting, and where we're going to highlight past presentations and information that we have made regarding kindergarten. Should call to your attention that we have provided you, although the documents and information is in board docs in a folder, we've also provided you with hard copies of those past presentations with a lot of information. We've provided you with a couple of articles, too, that I think are relevant and talk about the changing scope and the changing nature of kindergarten in the increased amount of things that are to be done in the 2.5-hour time that we currently have. Tonight we're also going to talk about our current kindergarten program so that you're clearly aware of the programs and the opportunities that we currently have available and the students that we're supporting and how we're serving them. We're going to talk about the instructional and curricular program improvements that have occurred going into this year. As we talked last year, one of the things that the board talked about is looking at our current program. We'll discuss the strengths and challenges to the current program, and then request for authorization to begin planning and come back to you at another date with a recommendation for all-day kindergarten or extended learning time for this 12-13 school year and beyond. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jen and ask her to begin with the presentation.
Okay, I'm going to begin with highlights from the presentations that were presented to the Board of Education in winter of 2012. On January 9th of 2012, the district administration presented to the Board of Education, and in that presentation, we gave an overview of what half-day kindergarten options look like and what full-day kindergarten options look like. Also in that presentation, we provided detailed information about the curricular and instructional improvements that we needed to do to our half-day based on the Common Core state standards and also necessary elements of social and emotional learning. And then lastly in that presentation, we presented the benefits of all-day kindergarten. We came back to the Board of Education again on February 21st of 2012, and in that presentation we provided detailed information that went down to the level of what a full day would look like for kids. We also specified time allocations in the different subject areas and learning, and provided some sample schedules that some of our teachers had put together for us. And then at the very end of that presentation, we did recommend that the Board of Education adopt all-day kindergarten for all students in our district. And that was without action in that meeting. On March 5th of 2012, a recommendation for all-day kindergarten was on the agenda for approval by the Board of Education, but prior to that board meeting, it was pulled from the agenda by the superintendent. One of the things that, as we reviewed all the presentations that we didn't do last year, we provided a lot of information on what our half-day program looks like now. We provided a lot of information on what an all-day kindergarten program could look like, but we did not mention some of the full-day or extended-day opportunities that we're offering for our students right now, and we thought it was important for you to know that information. So currently we have our half-day kindergarten program. It's important to know that it is required by the state that we provide a half-day kindergarten option for all students, and we have 796 students in that program this year, and it is provided at all 14 of our elementary sites. We offer a full day for dual language kindergarten in our district right now, and that full day option is provided for heritage Spanish-speaking students, and those are our students with limited English proficiency, so they'd be students in the ELL program. We have 42 students, and that program is offered in our 5 dual language sites. We also offer full-day intervention kindergarten, and I'm going to move down to the next one as well, full-day social skills kindergarten. Those are offered both in students' home schools and then in the afternoon at Kingsley. So the full-day intervention student is offered to students who are identified who have individual education programs, and they are specifically for academics, so specifically in reading and writing. Then that social skills program is provided for students who also have individual education programs, but it is more for behavior or social and emotional learning. In both situations, the students attend their home school in the morning, and then they travel to Kingsley, and they have that the rest of their day at Kingsley with a focus on either intervention or the social skills. And then lastly, this year through Title I funding, we are providing an extended day kindergarten option at BB, and that is a full day of kindergarten for an identified population of low-performing students. And those students were identified through screening measures in both literacy and math. And as with Title I guidelines, we definitely have program outcomes identified for that group of students, and we also have the metrics tied to those outcomes so that we can look at that program. That program started out this year with 13 students. We had 2 students move, so we are serving 11 students at BB in the extended day kindergarten program. Mr.
Is this the first year we've offered that?
This is the first year we've offered that.
What about these other programs?
The other programs, the social skills and the intervention, we've been offering for about 5 to 7 years. The full day dual language kindergarten, we started offering the second year that the dual language program was in place. So 4 years on that one, and half day forever.
Quick question. I'm worried if we wait till the very end,
No,
this will
that's
all
fine.
get kind of crazy. But the question I have on the extended day Title I kindergarten at BB, would it ever make sense to put 6 more students in that class because the teacher's paid for, the program's paid for? Would that ever make sense, or is that just like the craziest thing you've ever heard?
No, it could make sense.
Yeah, I'm just thinking. If, I know you don't want to get the class up to 29. That's not.
No.
That won't be as effective. But okay, thanks.
Actually, along those lines, on the full-day dual language kindergarten, that second half of the day, is that taught in Spanish or English?
It is taught, well, it still goes along with the percentages, but it is primarily taught in Spanish.
And would that not be beneficial for the English speakers?
Yes, it would be very beneficial to take the dual language kindergartens and offer all-day kindergarten for all of them.
That would seem a no-brainer since they're already there and the teacher's there and the classroom's there.
Right.
Is there a reason we don't do that?
It's probably just due to the program offering and suggestions at the time. They knew that there were certain kids who needed additional support, and it was probably provided in that way. But it is definitely something that we've talked about and a definite avenue for us to pursue for the future, as is the Title I programs.
Could they start next week? You know what I mean?
Yeah, tomorrow.
Well, I'd have to call Mr. Foynt on the way home, but
No, I understand. I
yeah.
just think that we have a rich program that's paid for.
Susan?
One of the strengths that we have is the ability to serve the needs of students when they come up. And that's what these programs are bred from serving them within their schools. But we also have, on the other side, we went through this with Mill Street last year, we have all these requirements for equal teaching for our requirements and classroom sizes. And I am fully supportive of this Heritage Spanish program, but when you look at there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 schools and 42 students in there, can you kind of explain how it kind of goes counterintuitively to what we're trying to do throughout all of our schools?
I think that moving forward, we need to look at using those resources more wisely and increasing the number of kids served in those programs.
I did have the opportunity to see the one at BB, and it was really interesting. Like, if a social worker had extra time, they would come in and teach something. I mean, it wasn't the same as just expanding their day. They were learning different skills as well in during that time. There wasn't just one teacher the whole time for all 11 kids.
That is true. They do have ELL teacher, could be social worker, but different teachers do come in, and that would still be an option. Okay. So we did a lot of talking last year about kindergarten improvements, and I wanted to cover some of the things that we are currently doing, some of the things we've have done, and some of the things that are in progress. Our math curriculum team is also in progress, but they did work on the kindergarten curriculum, and this year we are implementing changes in the content. And if you'll remember from last year, that's a focus on really focusing on numeracy and in-depth application of numeracy, but then also they are implementing changes in practices. So those are those math practice standards of looking at reasoning, argument, and so forth. And then we have also asked our teachers to increase the instructional time for math. So one of the things that we learned in working with the teachers last year is that time for math varied, and we asked them to increase that instructional time so that we could meet the demands of the curriculum and the demands of the Common Core standards. So some of the things that are in progress for us, we meet with all kindergarten teachers this week. And one of the things that we have been preparing for is in building a common philosophy of what kindergarten education is about. We have learned that our implementation varies from a highly developmental philosophy to a highly focused and academic philosophy. And we would like to be at a place where we continue to strive for high standards, but that we very responsibly and very intentionally provide developmental teaching in social and emotional learning, and also in meeting kids' physical needs, because that's what we need to do for 5 and 6 year olds. We have also been working continuing the work on our math curriculum. We are at that same place that we've described already this evening with the literacy. We have it down to instructional units, and we are working on identifying resources and assessments. And then we are also in the process of starting work on using the social and emotional learning standards and very intentionally writing those into the curriculum, into the kindergarten curriculum. So the difference is an intentional curriculum, intentional teaching from a social and emotional learning curriculum, instead of something that is just done implicitly and throughout practice. And then lastly, we have begun offering math professional learning this month. And again, that's an offering that is not required at this time for the teachers. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to summarize the strengths and the challenges of our half-day model. First and foremost, you all know we have great teachers. They are dedicated and talented teachers who are committed to teaching our youngest students. We have, at the kindergarten level, always have highly involved parents who are very interested in knowing what their kids are doing for their first experience. And we also have teachers and principals who are extremely dedicated to engaging the kindergarten parents so that they start off on the right foot from the student perspective and from the parent perspective. I've already talked about the curricular and instructional changes. We have made improvements to assessment in terms of alignment this year. We've worked with the assessment and analytics office to make sure that we've got our screeners down for kindergarten for math and literacy, and that we're actually implementing assessments 3 times a year instead of, in some cases, we were only implementing once a year or not for all students. In addition to that, we already shared the slide that shows the different programs. We are providing services and programs to support populations with the greatest need. We feel that we can do a better job than that. We feel that we need to provide support to more students of poverty. We feel we absolutely need to provide more services to students who are low performing and those who are ELL learners. We have had strong logistics and operations in our kindergarten program for a very long time. When we look at the challenges, one of the first challenges that we face is this instructional time. And if you think about the K-3 learning progression, you think about any time that you've tried to learn something new, whether it's golf, whether it's swimming, whether it's skiing, all of those types of things. that initial trajectory of learning is pretty steep. And then you acquire a certain set of skills, and then you're still progressing, but it's not that fierce curve that you face in the beginning. And one of the responsibilities that we're charged with is expanding that continuum of learning and making sure that we provide more instructional time and in-depth learning experiences so that whole K-3 progression or trajectory can provide for more of that smooth learning as we move through. We face rigorous demands of new standards. Not only do we face those demands in reading or in literacy and math, we face those coming up in science. And we have had some good looks, at those standards and are continuing to work with them. One of the challenges with us retaining the half-day program as our major service delivery model is retention in position. So if you can imagine, we have kindergarten teachers who teach 2 half-day sections a day, but then we also have kindergarten teachers who teach 1 section of half-day at a building. It's not a very attractive position to have to teach a half-day section and then drive to another building, set up kindergarten again, and teach it again. So one of the things that we've learned is that it's a desire of teachers to have a full-time position and to move into another grade level. So one of the things that we're faced with is continually working with and training new kindergarten teachers as they come in to take those positions. I've already mentioned the differing philosophies, and that is something that we're currently working on. I've alluded to this but not addressed it directly. We are challenged right now with equity in services. And if you think about the equity principle, there's a thing of equal, everybody gets all, everybody gets the same. But equity is for those populations who need more, they get more. And so we need to really think about equity in services and what we might do to close any achievement gaps that exist. And last but not least, I think this is one of the things, Dan will allude to this again, but we put 2 articles in your packet. And they really refer to, I think, what our kindergarten teachers are feeling, what we're feeling. That is not so much evidence-based, but that is very much experienced. And that is as we increase academic rigor. And that's something we have to do. We either have to make up for the rigor in grades 1, 2, and 3, or we have to start putting more rigor into our kindergarten program. And as we start putting more rigor into our kindergarten program, we actually squeeze out the other things that we can put in the kindergarten day. And the things that we squeeze out, are the things that we know that our kids need, that very intentional focus on their social and emotional learning. We absolutely know that we need to provide a developmentally appropriate. So right now we're trying to strike a balance between the academic demands and the developmentally appropriate and intentional teaching that we know we need to do. And we're pressed. We're pressed to get that done. So with that, I am going to turn it back to Dan.
Just a couple quick closing comments. In the past couple of weeks, I've had the great honor to visit a number of kindergarten classrooms. I say a great honor because it's amazing to see the things that are being done in those classrooms. I've had the opportunity to step into the social skills classes, the intervention classes, even the dual language classes, as well as some of our typical half-day kindergarten courses. And one word came to mind during each of those visits, and that was frantic. The teaching was at such a frantic pace. It was excellent instruction. Students were engaged. Students were thoughtful. But it was moving at a pace that I had difficulty keeping up with. I forgot what day of the week it was, when we were doing that. So to imagine a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old sitting in a course being taught at this frantic pace and the amount of things that we're bringing to them has to be frustrating for our teachers. It has to be frustrating for our kindergarten classrooms. They're doing an amazing job with what we have. We're fortunate to be a high-performing district, but as you saw from Tim's presentation tonight, we're not where we want to be. We're not where we need to be. We're not where we should be. We have students within this school district that are not performing at a level of which we would hope or expect. And we believe we have a way that we can begin to address that. And as good laws of school improvement tell us, the earlier we do it, the better we'll do it, rather than having to come back and remediate it or do it at a later time. Our intent is to do it early and to do it right. So what we're asking for tonight, we don't have a recommendation for you tonight. We are asking the Board of Education to have a conversation with us that would, we hope, lead to permission for us to begin planning a recommendation that we can come back to you that can provide more of our students opportunities for extended learning in kindergarten as early as next year. So with that, thank you for your time, and we'll entertain your questions and participate in conversation with you.
I'm not clear on what you're asking. More time for needy students? More, can you elaborate a little bit, please?
Okay. What we're asking for the Board of Education is to get a sense from the Board of Education as a whole on your feelings and interest in us developing an all-day kindergarten program that really could look in many different ways. So we've had conversation about making it available as an option for all students. We know that there's a significant cost that comes with that, and from a facility standpoint, we're not in a position to be able to offer that as early as next year. We know then from our presentation to you that we have populations of students that are not doing well. Research that you read last year and that you had says and supports the idea that there are students who are identified as at risk would benefit from this. So the other end could be to looking at expanding some of the programs that Jen explained to you today and to begin to offer it and make it available to more students. So that's what we're asking for. A conversation to be had by this Board of Education that could give us direction on planning and coming back to you with a recommendation.
If I could just make sure I heard you correctly. 13-14, we could not reasonably or effectively offer it to everybody.
That's correct.
And most of that is physical limitation.
That's correct.
However, we do have the capacity at certain schools to start it.
That's also correct.
Curriculum would be available for a full-day program if we decided to do it in selected locations where it was able to be done.
That's correct.
Now, the last part is, which you alluded to a couple times, so did Jen, is there a way to target any kind of selective full-day kindergarten to address those needs or those areas where there has been a demonstrated benefit?
There could be, yes.
So are you asking if we would be interested in that option as opposed to others or in addition to others?
I think what in general terms what we're asking for is we know we have some space available and the ability to deliver curriculum as early as next year. So what we're asking for the Board of Education is for permission for us to begin developing a recommendation that would come to you. And likely what we would do, we would look at targeting at-risk student populations is our initial, but we'd start to begin to have the conversation about how we could roll this out, what types of metrics we would look at with students that we put in this full-day program to consider further recommendations down the road to make it available to all students.
Because one of the discussion points I heard from the community and from the board last winter was there is not hard data for a variety of reasons, because it is so hard to get data on this type of stuff, that shows a district with the high-performing students don't necessarily get a ton of value. There's no data. I'm not saying they don't or won't, but there's no data that suggests that. Is anything you do, could that give us that kind of data which would justify a larger investment in the future?
Jen, go ahead.
So it is true. There isn't data that says all-day kindergarten for all students, that it either supports doing it, but there's no data that doesn't support. But I think what it does is the squeeze that we're talking about, and that's the squeeze to provide the academic rigor for all kids. And that affects your highest performing kids as well as your lowest performing kids. And then also to do what's right for them, to allow them to get up and move and do the physical things that they need to allow them to have more time in art as well, and more time in music. So, I think that is that is what I said is the experience.
Yeah, so although we're not prepared to talk about what the metrics would be right now, we believe that we could demonstrate that the students who participate in this program, regardless of who they are or where they come from, would benefit from this program.
A couple of things. One, I understand what you're saying about the squeeze. I mean, that seems intuitive. On the other hand, I'm not sure it's limited to kindergarten. I think the second grade teacher will tell you, with all the stuff that we're adding, that we don't have time for everything else. It seems to me that everyone's being squeezed as we try and increase rigor. Second, seems to me that the literature that you've provided and the other literature that I've tried to read does show that for at-risk kids, there is obvious benefit and lasting benefit. So I thought you
No, I'm
sort of
sorry.
dismissed
I
that.
did not mean to do that. I meant, I was talking about all kids,
Right.
but it is absolutely empirical.
So one, at risk, no question, and we're already identifying those. I guess I'm a little puzzled why the numbers are so small on those. And going back to Tim's presentation, we have gaps, and those are easily identified in at-risk screening. Now, I'm shocked at how few parents do early assessment, including my stepdaughter. I don't know if we have to present it in a better way, or if that it's not intimidating or whatever. Having said that, I can't imagine, and I'm not trying to put words in the mouth of this board, but I can't imagine there is anybody on this board that would say, if we can identify people that clearly have needs, we're going to do what we can to give them a good early start. I think that, on the other hand, all of the material I read is not near that strong consensus that it has lasting impact for all kids. Now, so on the all-day kindergarten, I guess I'm still confused, Dan. If we're saying, can we find ways, will you authorize us to find ways to impact these at-risk kids immediately? That's one thing to me that has just tons and tons of validity. If we're saying, would you let us continue to prepare a full all-day kindergarten, I don't know how much, I know for me, I don't know how much clearer we can be. That has to be part of a long-term program. We've got to look at facilities. We have to look at immersion programs. And you know, if that's what you're asking for, I guess my response is, why are you asking for that? We've been very clear in direction, and I'm sort of being extreme on that, but because I don't think that is what, but I wanted to clarify that.
You're right, and as we look at our initial recommendations, and based on what we have in terms of space available, what we think we have in terms of availability with resources and to deliver programs, we're not in a position right now to make a recommendation as early as next year that could service all of our kids. And our request is to begin to look at what we could do to recommend to the board moving forward. Initially, our recommendation next year will likely target at-risk populations of students. That may include other students as well. We have space and facilities where we can offer it, and so what we're asking for then is the permission of the administration to begin to design what that recommendation more formally would be to this Board of Education.
My fear is the creep that comes with this. We say, okay, this, and all of a sudden we're proposing, and that's what happened last year, and we got over our heads on that. There is a cost. Just because we have space doesn't mean that we don't have to have more resources. So as we open it up beyond that, again, we're back to the long-term plan. What are we going to assign resources to? And I have not much problem prioritizing at risk. I have a whole lot bigger problem, especially in this community, saying let's see how quick we can expand the program to everybody.
having been involved in this before, and I'm not going to put words in Susan's mouth because she and I were involved in this, but I'm fully behind this. But I would say, dovetailing on what Dave just said, there's some clarity that we'd need on a few clarity that I would need. I don't want to say wait on a few things. Facilities, timeline. I can get this to you. Cost, execution plan. If there's hard data, if there's studies, if there's something we can get that gives us some kind of correlation between successful programs and the benefits that come out of that, and then the populations targeted. If there's some clarity there, I think that's what we're looking for here. Because I think I better watch how I say this. I think that's part of the problem that we had before, was the lack of clarity there and the lack of understanding around that.
Jen, Jim just alluded to it, and Mike started this conversation. I think our community really does well with data. And I go back to Hot Lunch, for example. 5 years ago, or even more than that, we talked about how Hot Lunch would really help kids, help all kids. And we didn't have the facilities for it. There was no infrastructure at many of the schools. And though there were some kids that got a warm breakfast and a warm dinner that didn't need it, but I think what happened, as it was rolled out and as it went into a couple of buildings, people then saw the merits of it, and then everybody in the community was saying, we need it, we need it, we need it. So that's the data. So my question for both of you, what Jim and Mike have alluded to, if there's a way to roll this out next year, on a select basis, however a much more minimal scale, obviously, and the seats are empty, and the programming's available, will there be a way that we can tell the community and show them that all students progress, everyone moves their bar up? Will that be something we'll be able to tell the community?
So there are multiple ways that we could roll it out on a small scale next year. One of the things that we will keep very heavy on our mind is that equity principle, making sure that we're keeping our at-risk populations. And some of the things that we have data and metrics we can provide to show the progress and improvement of kids, during that year. So let's say that's next year. One of the challenges will be that we'll be looking at their progress in the fall of 2014. And then to anything of a long-term effect, we are anticipating, I really want to emphasize the importance of that K-3 progression and trajectory. We need to make sure that we're doing a really good job with that pathway, and that we're providing support for that in the kindergarten year as well as the first and second. So then our hope is that, we have a situation where in third grade we would have less kids at risk, but the immediate hope is that we have less kids identified for intervention in first grade in the fall of 2014.
So I think you told me, yes, we will be. I understand it's a timing issue.
Yes, we can implement next year. Yes, we could implement for different populations of students. We have multiple ways that we could roll it out.
Right, but I guess my question is, if this is a true public education model, and we've got every group is in the classroom, it is at a school. Let's pick a school, Riverwoods.
Okay.
They have the space. Everyone, regular ed students, we want to be able to, certainly we want to make sure that what am I trying to say in the vernacular, the education vernacular, that they progressed. Of course they're going to learn a little bit more if they're in school all day, but that would be the anticipated projection you would want over this increased cost. That's cost justified, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yes.
We would be able to look at data for the regular ed kids as well that would be in the program.
Yes,
in that amount
we would,
of time.
because we collect the same data.
Okay,
So we would
that's
be able
what
to
I
look
thought.
at
I just
that.
thought when we're on international sound here, let everyone know.
Oh, go ahead.
First of all, I agree on the at-risk kid. We just saw the presentation of our data. We have some at-risk kids. This program seems like it would fit in there perfectly. The other thing is, I understand about researching the data and looking for long-range data, but the counter to that is even if we have long-range data to support that it's the right thing for the students, is it the right thing for us going forward? I mean, we already perform very high. We have consistent scores over the last 4 years, so we're at a pretty good level. Is it going to raise it another 2% on the top end, or lower it on the bottom end? Go from 10% to 5% on the bottom end. So we can pick up another 5% long term if we get an extrapolation on that. And I don't know if you can do that in the next couple of years, but that's what I would be looking for, is to pick the bottom up across the district.
So you'd look at that when that population of kids that goes through were in grades 3, 4, and 5.
And I've got the metric on the third grade. I said kids go through that, and I know where the break point is, and especially with reading and math and so forth. I had an understanding of how critical that time period is. And I'll say it again, fifth grade, they should all come out reading and math, ready to go to junior high.
That's right.
That's where the breaking point is, I think, for us as a district. The other part that was disappointing in the last go-around was the financial impact, because we had these big glossy numbers and global implications. And I think we've got to know site by site what the costs are going to be. Because if we're going to put a long-term dollar value committed to this, there's got to be, just like there's a give and take in the school day, there's a give and take in the budget too. And we're only going to be able to tax so much and get so much on the table for facilities. What falls off later on? And we have to look long-term up at the high school level. Are we going to impact our funding? That's the kind of data I want to see, long-term financing. We'll put money in the game early on for the at-risk kids. If we're going to do it district-wide, what happens to the high school students, and is there potential that there's a long-term program fall off when we go forward?
I think that starting off, certainly because of space issues and putting together curriculum is important. I think that we do have to, as Jackie said, we're a public school for all of our students, and I think you reach a point where you're providing inequitable education for all your students, especially as we see the impact of all-day kindergarten. And then the challenges for those kids are in half-day. Kindergarten teachers are conscientious people, and the half-day kindergarten teachers are going to feel compelled to provide the same quality of programming as students are receiving in the full day. And if you've got frantic now, think how that sense of frantic, and they're getting evaluated based on student performance. That kind of pressure is certainly inequitable, and I think ultimately detrimental. My experience of the research is that what they see when you say long-term impacts is what you see with low-performing students, and the comparisons have generally been, and again, it's hard, you don't have control groups that you would have, is that low-performing students, when they don't get the interventions, become a rock rolling downhill. It just gets worse and worse and worse. So when you meet them early on, they don't have that downhill, and they can build off of that. And what you see, if you are taking students for a half day and they're in engaged homes and they're getting read to and they get 8 hours of sleep and 4 squares a day, they catch up. Those full day kindergarten teachers are doing well till third grade. The half day catch up. However, they have things at home generally when they've done that the low performing students don't. So what happens when you put those students who are ready to learn, who've had 2 years, into an all-day kindergarten where they're now able to build up more? And that's hard to say, and that's the challenge with the research is you can't have said what they would have done if you didn't do it because they did it. It becomes like a skit. So let me finish because they did it. I mean, so I think, educators, sort of use a lot of their own experiences to say, we know when we spend more time with them, we know when we have less frantic time, that our students do better. I mean, that is what all the research says. The more time you spend with kids, the better they're going to do. That applies pretty much everywhere. I appreciate you hearing that we're not going to be, go, 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 AP kindergarten. We're going to have, oh no. It's still going to be developmental kindergarten with social emotional, and they're going to have art time, and they're going to stick their hands in goop, and they're going to have play time, and maybe more of that. And then what is the impact of that kind of great time together, learning to play out in the playground, gym, and art? There is an impact of that as well. So I appreciate that we don't have the space to throw it all out there. I think our kindergarten teachers, because I've talked to a kindergarten teacher, appreciates that we are being thoughtful about this, that we're not just jumping into it. But I don't think that we can say we're just going to do our low income. And I know that there's costs. I also know that reading in the newspaper, 204 has seen their ISET scores go up every year since they've implemented all-day kindergarten. Now, I don't know if that's cause and effect, entirely, but what is the cost savings of us meeting students early on and getting to them so that they are not going to need interventions in second grade and third grade. They're not going to need interventions in sixth grade. So I think there's savings that are hard to quantify. It's hard to put together that long-term plan to say that these are what the savings are. It's something certainly we should try for. But the value of having students who are ready for rigorous learning, who are working well together, and who are excited to be in classrooms where they're just building on strengths you can't put a number on that. Thank you.
Susan.
I hear you saying you want one thing, but you need something else. I'm still not exactly sure what you're asking us for. I mean, I really, you want to serve the one population. You'd really like to extend the school day, and we haven't talked about classrooms and dollars that go along with it. So, what is it that you're asking us for specifically? Because that's pretty broad.
She knows exactly what she's asking.
Yeah.
Dan has.
It's the belief of this administration that all-day kindergarten is the right thing to do for all of our students. And with that, we would like to move ahead with planning. And in that planning, we would like some guidance. Is the first step in our planning to look at providing it on a smaller scale? Or is the first step in our planning to move ahead with all-day kindergarten for all?
So that's exactly what we're asking for some direction, for some guidance from the Board of Education. And Jen said it, and we've had this conversation as an administrative team. It is our belief that it will benefit all of the students who participate in this district. We're not in a position right now to recommend all-day kindergarten for all students next year. We are in a position to begin planning and working toward the potential to phase that in over time. And so what we're asking for is from some guidance from the Board of Education to begin that process. And what I think I have heard, at least to this point, is I believe I've heard the Board of Education speak to support for the potential benefits that all-day kindergarten program would have for some populations of our students, and that you would support, at least initially, starting with keeping that in mind. While what I've heard from other board members is, and if that allows us to service even additional students beyond, that could be part of our process in terms of planning that we would bring back to the Board of Education.
I know you weren't sitting in that seat last year when we talked about it, but I think the giant stumbling block or roadblock that we came across was, where do we put these students? What does that look like? And how much does it cost? Which we still don't have those answers. So it's really hard to say, in a vacuum, does it sound great? Yes, of course. It's a wonderful thing. But when we have to apply, and decide, can we keep, music in the high schools and still have full-day kindergarten, that's a value judgment that we have to look at for our community. And we haven't talked about any of those things. So in a vacuum, yes, I would love it. Start tomorrow, and start with the kids that need it the most. And of course, but without those other factors.
And so that would be the next thing that we would want to do for
right.
you. Right. But our intent also is not to bring something back before the Board of Education that had been discussed last year and not acted on without getting a sense of where the Board of Education is on this topic. So you could have told us, no, we're not interested in this. We've been there. We've had this conversation. Move on. So we reintroduced this as a conversation then, so that we could have a sense of where the Board of Education is on this topic.
But we haven't had this conversation. We had an all or nothing conversation. This conversation said, oh, we already are doing some all-day stuff, okay? And so there's a continuum. I do want to respond to this concept of equality. The fact of the matter is that if we measure equality in equal amount of touches for that, we don't have equality, because the at-risk child, as you very well pointed out, keeps going down, and you have all kinds of interventions. We don't plan on giving interventions to the greatest percentage of our kids. To me, it's a no-brainer, and it is fiscally sound because the whole point of early intervention is that we don't have to have near as much intervention later down the road. That saves money. So it's simply where are we going to put our attention and the resource. To me, I don't think you can put it on a continuum of equality. We've said we want to address achievement gap. And what I clearly, I think there is consensus that, yes, we need to look at how we address that achievement gap, and we need to start it as early as we can, age-wise, chronologically wise. As soon as you start talking about non-at-risk, we're going to have a conversation about resources, and like she said, we cannot evaluate that until we know what are we going to look at over the next 3 years. I think you figured out that I'm pretty adamant about that.
To answer your question, I want to see the long-term district picture, what it looks like when it's fully loaded across the district for all students for all-day kindergarten. I want to know what those costs are, what the impact to facilities, everything. Because it's not that I don't see the need for all-day kindergarten, because I understand there's a need, and I can see a benefit to it. I don't think that's the point. It's really, we have to be, like it or not, we have to be fiscally responsible with the resources that we have, and we have to make sure they're used judiciously. So I'm not against all-day kindergarten. I'm not saying don't do it, but what I am saying is that when we talked about it before, there was really no plan brought forward. It was just like, well, here's what we're going to do. It's going to cost $10 or $15 million. Let's go down the road and let's or nothing.
Yeah.
Let's get in the car and see where the car takes us. Okay. Not up for that again. It's got to be thoughtful, and we've talked about this before. So it's I see the need, I see the benefit. And
A thoughtful, strategic process on how we're going to roll this out over time.
It'd be a change. It'd be nice.
If I could, we are not going to solve all the kindergarten today. I mean, just to be clear to everybody, the question before us, I think, is can we authorize Dan to look at one or perhaps more than one option or variations of one option to start a limited program which targets at-risk students? Is everybody comfortable with that? I mean, we're not approving anything, but is everybody comfortable with him looking at a targeted thing and not the all-in that was previously our only option? Is anybody against that?
No.
And there are going to be plenty more conversations about this, I'm sure, but that's just something to get them started. Okay? Anything else, Jen?
No. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Jen. The beauty is now we get to our action items now. IASB. Did you have anything else?
We did not have anything else, no.
IASB. As we discussed last month, we have our IASB recommendations or resolutions. And Terry Fielden was on the thing, so he's our resident expert. He's already been approved. He's our guy.
He is our guy.
At the Triple I conference. So I know everybody's had another 2 weeks to look at it. I know Dave had a couple things. I believe it was all the even numbers, or most of them. So I'll refer it to Dave. We've all had time to look at them. So
Wasn't the administration also going to bring their recommendations?
When we talked last time, administration, we did review the recommendations and supported the recommendations for action that are in there as presented. Thank you.
Really?
Yep.
Okay. So you don't want to go, you just want, I mean, I'd be happy to tell you the ones that I'm concerned about.
yeah, the intention was not to go through every single
Very
one.
good. Number 2.
Yes.
Deals with charter schools.
Right. Yep.
I see no, I mean, I completely disagree with the rationalization. And I'll preface this by saying what I don't like is the feeling through many of these that, well, I didn't get trouble no matter how I say it, but I mean, this is just,
Territoriality.
yeah, but it smacks very closely of being way too much in bed with the ISBE. That's being influenced way too much with the IEA. So there I said it. But having said this, here's what they're saying is we should put a limit on how the state funds charter schools. So if the state decides that we should have a charter school in Naperville, which the odds of them deciding that are very, very slim, obviously, because that's not where they would put these. But what they're saying is if it took 200 students from us, that they shouldn't be able to give them funding equal to 200 times what it costs us, $14,000, but only the 8% we get from the state. So let's pass this, and then let's go on out and campaign for charter schools, because it'll make us all kinds of money. We get to offload kids, but, I mean, we have the ability to tax for real estate taxes. State doesn't have that. So charter school does not have access to the same funding as we do. I just don't see it as being equal.
The issue is that, especially in Thornton and a couple of the southern districts there, the state is taking that district's portion of state aid, and those students that are going to that charter school, they're taking that money from the school district and giving it to the charter school. So the school district is actually operating with less funds than it had before. What the resolution wants to say is that if the state is going to set up a charter school, they should provide the funds for that charter school and not impact the district that's already in place and cut their funds. So in essence, when a charter school is planted by the state, and the state doesn't need permission anymore from the district, they can just plant whenever they want.
Absolutely.
But the state is taking money from the local taxing body to pay for it and not paying for it out of state funds.
Well, they're taking it from the state support they would have given, but my point is
but the district
they're going to
is
have
losing
less students to educate, correct?
Well, but you have less money overall as well. It's a tremendous impact.
You should have less money overall if you have less students.
I don't think it's not just apples to apples. It's not just like that. According to these other districts, they're really losing money. And there was a great discussion at the committee that there's a loss of money, a real loss of money to these districts.
Clearly there is.
Yes.
I understand that. But my response to them is, you have less students to educate. Of course you have less budget left. You should need less. If we have 500 less students, because these aren't happening in large districts, I'm trying to go proportionate, obviously we have reduced expenses. This is simply trying to keep charter schools from being economically feasible.
But charter schools cost more money. They cost more per capita because you're dealing with a smaller population base, and you still have to fund the salaries and so forth. These districts are losing disproportionate amount of money.
But this is clearly saying they can only take an amount equal to what the existing district is spending. So whether that charter school spends more per student or not does not have anything to do with this. It says I think we spend $14,000. If a charter school is going to spend 18, they can only take funding from us up to the $14,000. At least as the way I read it.
Yeah, but it's the state aid plus the district funds, so it doesn't work out.
What do you mean state aid plus the district funds?
The district contributes to the charter school. They still take the taxing body's portion for that student. It's not just, and what they're saying is the state should fund the whole thing.
Are you telling me that, because that's not how I read this, are you telling me...
I'm telling you that was a discussion in the room.
Are you telling me that we would have to write a check to them, or we would just... I think what it's saying is that we would not receive as much state aid, up to the amount of number of students, time, cost of education. We don't end up writing a check to anybody.
Yet the district would write a check to the charter school. That was the exact discussion at the meeting.
Yeah, the legislation proposed would require that 100% of the per student cost would be provided to the charter school, whether it comes from the state or it comes from the local district property tax. Currently, if a charter school is formed, the local district can negotiate between 75 and 120%
Right.
of that cost. So there's a negotiation. If it's created by state authority, it's 100% of the per pupil cost, not just the state funds, but the local funds as well.
Okay, this says the state chartered school.
But that's the proposal, is what they would like, is that the state money
Oh.
goes to the school.
This is what is saying that the proposal that they have on state chartered schools or charter schools that were not approved by local school board. We know that. There are currently only 2 such schools. The newly appointed, these types of charter districts are created by the state without referendum or elected local representation. The state charter schools are funded by the state diverting state revenues, otherwise due the local school district directly to the state chartered school. There is nothing about us having to subsidize the state funding for this.
Yes, that's the proposal. The proposal is that the dollars diverted are limited to the state funds. The reality is, on the next page, that a charter school created by the Illinois State Board of Education, however, to fund the
Where you
program,
at?
I'm midway down, just before the end of this.
After the resolutions
paragraph
committee
on page
rationale?
12,
Okay.
right? However, to fund the program, the charter school automatically takes 100% of the district's per student cost for each student enrolled in the charter school from the school district and gives it to the charter school. What they were proposing is that it would only be limited to the state funding on a per pupil basis for that charter school. And that's what this...
I understand. Let's say help me understand, David, $10,000, just to keep round numbers, and the state contributes $2,000 of that. We contribute $8,000 of that.
Right, we would write a check for $8,000 of that.
And we have 1,000 students, so we're getting $200,000, $2 million, whatever it is, from the state. They will withhold from the state aid up to the full amount of educating 100 students or whatever it is. I guess I don't see anywhere that says that I understand that we'll lose more than the 20% of state aid but only up to the point of
The full
equaling
cost of every
the
student.
full cost of every student. That's different than us writing a check to them. That simply means,
That's what they're asking them to do, is
Well.
to limit it to the state aid.
Correct.
They're saying now the state takes
100%.
Their 2,000 plus our 8. They're saying,
Right.
fine, you're going to start a charter school, just take the state money.
Right.
Don't take our tax dollars, because these are schools that are not approved by the local taxpayers.
I-
These are schools that the state has come in and said that they're going to do.
I understand
You're
that.
taking away the
Well.
authority of the local taxpayer to decide whether they want that school or not, but then you're charging the local
I
taxpayer.
understand what you're
now,
saying,
hold it,
but
now, hold
that's
it.
not how I
Let's
read
let-
it.
Let's make sure I think we're getting closer on the math here, which Susan is getting more to the political issues, which you alluded to early. Let's just make sure we get the math straight.
Well, that's all I care
Yeah,
about,
no,
is the
no,
math.
let's start with that.
Right.
In your example, $10,000 to educate a kid in this district, or any district. State kicks in 20%. Currently, it's somewhere between, we got to provide somewhere between $7,500 and $12,000, and that's negotiated, correct?
Correct.
Under this proposal and the legislation that these guys want, we would be on the hook for $2,000 per kid, which is what the state gives us, correct?
Correct.
Okay? So the math is such that what both sides are saying is correct. Is basically, Dave is absolutely correct. We pay $10,000 per kid. They're gone in a charter school. We don't have that kid anymore. We're going to give them $10,000. What Susan's saying is also correct, and that's the gist of their argument. Once we get past the math, is that the schools should be controlled by the Board of Education, which answers to the taxpayer, and not to the state, which decides to put a school somewhere and says, you in Woodland Township or wherever, Thornton, we're going to put a school here. Your kids can go there. We're going to run it. We want you to pay their tuition. Okay, so Dave disagrees with that, and I think I heard the arguments. It's a move against charter schools, in your opinion. It's certainly a restriction on them financially. It'll make it much more difficult to institute them.
Well, the state has to pay more money for them.
Well,
If the state
and
wants
our
a
state
charter
is
school-
flush in cash.
But
No,
the state says if the state wants a charter school, they can pay for 100%
I
of the
understand.
cost.
In the end, it will make it much tougher to institute charter schools. That's what Dave said, and that's probably true. I'm not taking a side here. I'm just playing it out.
I hear you. Well, and I think that that's exactly what that's designed to do. And I still, and let's, not beat the dead horse. I still
Too
don't
late.
think
Too late.
that they're asking.
That horse is so
I
dead.
still,
No, I mean, Dave,
I still
Dave-
don't believe that they're asking us to actually.
All I wanted to
put
do is
tax
make
on
sure
it.
that
No, I agree with you.
both sides were clear on.
Okay, I agree with you.
Okay, and is there any interest to
Change
disagree, to
recommendation.
change your recommendation? Is there any other interest besides Dave? Next one? Was 4 or 6?
Number 4.
Yeah.
And this really affects everybody.
Sure.
What they're saying is, I think, what they're saying is, we would like them to lobby. We're under a tax cap that we can only increase, and we can increase without referendum up to CPI. So let's say it's going to be 2% this year, right? And we've experienced this where some have expressed we must take everything we can because, we can't get it back. What they're saying is, well, let's say that if we could have levied 2% and levied nothing, didn't take any of it, and we do that for 5 years in a row, that accumulates and we can now get, after 5 years, 10% over what CPI is because we didn't take it in later years, right? That's essentially what that's asking.
That's good for 5 years. Yeah, I mean.
Yes, that's exactly what
It's an extreme case, but I believe the math is correct. Yes. No.
But what you do is you create, you really have created Pandora's box here because now a negotiating body knows that you've got really deep pockets. They can go on back any time that we didn't do this, it's basically on the books. I mean, I just don't understand that. It runs against all concept of budgeting. When a company or we say we're going to hold the line this year, it doesn't mean that they got extra money to spend the next year. And it's not completely unfair to the taxpayer that can't plan at all what his, at least now we know that my real estate taxes are not going to go up more than inflation. But let's say I move into town and we haven't, they could go up 8%, 9%, 10%. And the whole point of tax cap is to give us an impetus to budget, and 2, some peace of mind to the taxpayer that, there's some semblance to inflation. I just don't see that that's fair to the taxpayer at all.
Now, besides this peace of mind, you do understand that there's no way a taxpayer could pay more. They could only pay less under this. You do understand that, right?
Right, I understand that.
So this is giving school boards the option of, let's take a different example than not raising taxes for 5 years. Let's say we had a year where we're going, we don't know if this state's going to pull our money or stick retirement on us in 5 years, but this year we're pretty good. So instead of going 3%, let's go 2%. But there's an imaginary line where, in 2 years when the state goes wham, you got to throw in 9% in pensions, then we can go, hey, but guess who saved all that money in the meantime? It's not sitting in a bigger reserve fund, it's sitting in the taxpayer's pocket. So what could the possible harm be in that?
Well, the harm, like I said, is, to me, the big fear is that you're just creating money for negotiating groups to go after, no matter how far offloaded it is. I mean, pardon me?
It's worse if it's in the bank. I mean,
Isn't it the same if you have it in the bank? I mean, isn't it worse? I mean, isn't
We raise it and spend it. We don't, I mean, yeah, I just,
But that was part of the problem with Evergreen Park, right, with this last teacher strike. They looked at what was in reserve and said, well, you have the money in reserve, so we should have a raise. It's the same argument. They had cash on hand, and they wanted to cash on hand.
the question is, where would you rather save the money? Would you rather have the taxpayers save it and have the time value of money on their side, or we stockpile it?
I would prefer that we do neither, that
Okay.
we be responsible in budgeting, and we don't open ourselves up to a liability that because we decide to hold the line, okay, we decide to hold the line, we're not going to expand programs. And it's not a matter of just we passed up putting money in the bank. Now, all of a sudden, just because we were prudent, we held the line, we budgeted, cut programs we didn't need. Now, that simply means that any time, basically, it is still in the bank because all we have to do is raise it. We don't have to go ask anybody.
You can't get that money back that you didn't collect. You cannot get it back.
Sure you can.
No, you can't.
Not now. Under this, we would be able to.
No, you can't
Under
go
this-
retroactively. You cannot go back, and if you freeze taxes for 5
That's
years,
just
you
as
can't
not-
go back and retroactively get those taxes.
That's just not true. Do the math. Instead, if it's 2%, now I can raise it up to make up for what I didn't get.
No, you can raise it up to the higher level you could have went to if you had gone the full PTEL.
But those
It's the
years
same
you didn't-
thing.
No, it's not, because the years
It
you
is.
didn't do it, you are collecting it. You can never go back and recollect it.
Okay.
I think that's...
Okay.
Exactly.
I left $5,000 on the table. Okay? But next year, I can go get that 5,000 by simply raising the taxes.
No. Let me give you an example. If you had a $1,000 tax bill, and we decided to freeze the taxes, and there's no raise, and next year we had 1,000 in your example, and each year we could have raised it 2%. So each year we could have put a $20 raise on it. So the first year we would have gotten 20 more. The next year we would have gotten 40 more, roughly, not compounding, but roughly 40. The third year, we're still at 1,000. In one scenario, if there was another 2% increase, we would be up to 1,060. What we're saying is, well, not we're, what these people are saying is, that third year, even though we want 1,000, we want the power to go to 1,060 the third year. However, that 20 you saved in the first year and that 40 the taxpayer saved in the second year, they will always have that. They will never give that up.
Right. But we couldn't if we don't change this. There are some districts that don't raise their taxes max every year. I mean, that's one of our problems. We've baked in and we just assume that we are going to raise taxes to the max. In my way of thinking, that's a false assumption. And the fact of the matter is that so you let me keep that $60 so I get the use of that 60 for those 3 years. But all of a sudden you go back and instead of taking the $20 this year, you take 80 from me.
No.
I need a whiteboard.
Yeah, you do.
I would like to
What?
know the names of those districts that do it, but I would imagine that it becomes a political maneuver for them.
Well, and Dave,
And they pay for that.
Dave, remind me how many taxes we abated last year? Dave, was it about 3 million?
Completely different than that.
And the year before? And the year before?
Call the question, are we doing support this or?
Do you think?
Well, I mean, to me, it's not fair to the taxpayer. I'd like us to hold on, obviously.
I would suggest that this actually has a potential to save taxpayers money.
I agree.
And I would support it. Does anyone else,
Support the recommendation of the committee.
does anybody else disagree with the recommendation that was made? I think you had number 8 next. Did that one.
We're going to suggest that businesses should absorb the cost. I mean, this just makes no sense to me at all. If we're concerned about this, I call your attention that last year we voted against allowing the state, allowing schools to give stipends to school board members. If we're concerned about that, we should be stipending them out of the tax money that's already paid. But to suggest that we should give impetus to local businesses having to pay for time off so that I can go and get trained, that's, again, just taking advantage of the local taxpayer.
Terry, I am curious what the discussion was on this one.
Well, the discussion was that the employer should be encouraged to allow to use vacation days, or if the employer wanted to contribute to pay for time off, being a volunteer elected official, that the employer should be encouraged to do that. It wasn't really that the employer had to do it, but it was...
Well, it was designed to pressure them. Obviously, I can use vacation time already.
Well, you know,
it is suggesting time off with pay.
Let's look at it for what it is, and I can tell you how my employer looks at it, because they give me latitude on my time at work. If I'm at a board meeting late, which this is running into an area where it might be late, they're not really expecting me back at work at 8 o'clock in the morning. They allow me a little flexibility to come in a little bit later. That's part of what they do because I'm a volunteer for the community. But they're not doing it.
That's different than us saying they should be doing that.
This was one that, as an administration, we did have some discussion and dialogue about, and ultimately, because the rationale behind this was that it was an encouragement, it's a belief statement as opposed to any sort of legislation for a requirement. We were willing to support the recommendation.
It does say belief statement. It's not calling for legislation.
Pardon me?
It says a belief statement.
Well, so it's okay to believe something that's wrong as long as we don't recommend it? Come on. I mean, it's either a good idea or a bad idea.
Companies have what they call social accountability, and they have things they want to give back. I'm not saying it's a small business owner that can always do it. Larger corporations and middle-sized corporations have this social accountability. They want employees to come and tell them what to donate to or things that are of interest to them, and I don't think it's as an evil a thing as we're making it out to be. It's a choice.
I didn't say it was an evil thing
Well,
necessarily,
it
but
was
social accountability is no longer social accountability when it's mandated.
But David,
It's not mandated.
It's not mandated.
Well, okay.
It's not mandated. But I'm saying that there are people, Terry's company for one, that places value in this kind of community
I understand.
service.
Guess what? My company does too. Okay. Of course, I'm the boss, but
That's
the
not our
point
problem.
is the point is to go to Starbucks or go to someone. It is saying to the public that in addition to paying their taxes, they should also now start, paying for our involvement in that. And I go back to they should give us a stipend to start with, and that's not an issue. But
I can say I'm not a big fan of this, but I don't care either way, quite honestly. It's a belief.
Give me one. Come on, give me one.
Okay. I support Dave on this, but I really don't care either way. I don't think it's going to make a big difference.
I don't care either way, but I support Dave. There you go.
Okay. Let me be more clear. I understand his point. I agree with his point. I don't think this belief statement is going to make a difference, so I would rather move on.
I agree that I don't think it's going to make a difference either, but I have a problem with us passing stuff that we don't think should make a difference because it weakens the ones that we do care about. The only other one that I had was number 12, which does directly relate to us, and that's sharing school buses. Why the heck we should have to go and get permission from the state and pay them a fee for a permit to allow the park district to rent a bus from us is ridiculous. I mean, that's just in bed with the state. Which is essentially what it's saying, that right now, if I understand correctly, holy cow, we got bugs running around this place. Big old bug came down on me.
That was smooth. Smooth. Televised worldwide.
We are streaming live. This is a special night.
Right, and they're saying that we shouldn't need it, and they're saying that it is okay to do it.
Yeah, which is what we do now.
Right.
We can share a bus.
But we have to have a special use permit, and we have to pay the licensing to the state for it. So this is what, if we vote again, if we,
If you disagree with the committee, the recommendation.
help me, David, am I seeing this?
Yes.
They don't
Recommends do not adopt.
Yeah, right.
Right, and I'm saying no. If we do not adopt, that means it stands that we still have to get a special use permit and pay the state to share our buses. What they're saying is, we should be able to share our buses without going to the state and getting permission, as long as we're not making a profit on it.
I think right now we do not get a special use permit to share our buses. I
Really?
think the
Well, 'cause-
state proposal is that we would do that, and that we can do it through an intergovernmental agreement and not get a special use permit.
That's what they're recommending here, right? That's what I want. What you said is what I want. But I think what they're saying here is right now, to do that, we're supposed to get, current Illinois law places prohibitive restrictions on the use of school buses for such requests, including the required purchase of temporary special use permits. It would be a better use of tax-funded equipment and more efficient use. So is that true, David, that currently it says that we have to get temporary special use
I thought that
permits?
meant if I wanted to rent the bus.
No.
For a party.
If we provide the bus with our driver and all, we do not have to get a special use permit. However, if we allow them to utilize their bus and they provide their driver, they have to get a special, we do then have to get a special use permit.
And why would
What they would like to have do is get rid of the special
Right,
use
exactly.
permit and make it so that it can be an intergovernmental agreement between the two
Right,
parties
exactly.
and not have to get any special use permit.
And that's what I support. And they're saying
okay.
no.
No, that is what they support as well.
No, they say
Be-
do not adopt.
But the committee rationale was to write legislation to get rid of the special use permit and not adopt it in the form that it was given here. We read this last.
Yeah,
it
I've seen it.
says,
Okay. So currently, we need a special use permit, temporary use permit, if we're going to just let them use our bus, rent the bus without the driver, right? And what the proposal is that there would not be a temporary use permit needed, right? And we're coming back, and their rationale is they would rather what? That's beyond me.
yeah, I can get you more detail.
Well, no, I'm just saying, I don't see why the state should be involved in telling us what we can do with a bus, and it shouldn't be generating income for them. That's all I'm saying. So I would support their the proposal. No, I would adopt. I would recommend adopting. When you read the second half of the rationale, it's strictly saying we should be allowed to share our buses without paying the state and getting involved in it. Right? Isn't that what it's saying? I don't see why we wouldn't support that.
I agree with Dave. That's two.
So can we vote on that?
Yeah.
What?
Does all in favor of supporting the do not adopt? Just show of hands. Raise your hand. As presented. the do not adopt recommendation from the Resolutions Committee.
No,
No, just this one. This one. I just want to show of hands. We'll do another vote here and then.
To support it as written right now.
You support the do not adopt for this one?
No.
As it is written.
For number 12. Do you agree with the committee?
No. What? Oh, just a minute. I thought you were just saying that. You said, say it again.
The committee recommends do not adopt.
Right.
Do you agree with the committee's recommendation?
No.
Susan?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Okay. So, that's majority supports the committee's recommendation.
But I get to at least say no.
I said no. He said
yeah,
no.
I know. You didn't. I just want to cast my vote.
You're not alone. Okay, so now we've gone. Or were there any other resolutions that someone wanted to discuss? So I'll entertain a motion to approve the resolutions committee's recommendations in total for Terry to present to the conference.
So moved.
Second.
Third.
Roll call.
Price?
Yes.
Romberg?
Yes.
Yench?
Aye.
Dennison? Weeks?
No.
Fielding?
Yes.
Crotty?
Yes.
Motion carries. Terry, you have your marching orders.
10:30 Saturday morning.
And we're-
There, B squared.
I know we did. It's just a minor thing. It's not minor for most people in the room, though. I was kidding. Come on. It is a major thing. I don't know why we left it to the end either, but because we saved the most important stuff till the end. Okay, we have a contract before us. Mr. Zager, would you like to say a few words?
And I'll invite Carol to jump in any time too. This is a 3-year agreement with NESPA, the Naperville Education Support Professional Association. So it would be through 2015, and it's consistent with the negotiation points that we have discussed in the past. And we're asking the Board of Education to approve it.
I assume you have a synopsis you can hand to the press here.
Yeah, is Susan still here?
Well, why don't you
There you are.
recap
So you've
it
got
very
that?
quickly?
She didn't get to
I have to pull it out.
Well, isn't it about a
Leave a
2.5%
rope on.
increase over 3 years, roughly?
I can pull it out.
No, don't worry about that. I just thought it might be good to let the public know. I approve. I move approval of the NESPA agreement as presented.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the NESPA agreement as presented. Is everybody getting punch drunk here? But was there any discussion on that? This is important. We value all our employees, and I think our negotiating committee has reflected the will of the board to treat them fairly and with respect, and hopefully this contract represents that. So if there's no discussion, well, and there you go.
Yeah, I echo everything you said. What I do appreciate is that we are actually voting on a contract. We have it before us. It's a done deal. We're going to sign it afterwards. And, as you know, I pushed for that, and 2 years ago we were told we couldn't possibly do this. So miracles apparently have happened.
Roll call.
Romberg?
Yes.
Fielding?
Yes.
Weeks?
Aye.
Price?
Yes.
Crotty? Yes. Yench?
Aye.
Dennison?
Motion carries. Thank you.
Any older new business?
Older new business? Everybody can look at the calendar and see that we have a meeting here in 2 weeks, and be televised worldwide again. Anyway, motion.
Second.
Motion and second to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned.